Dungeon Hunter. Chapters 121 to 140. Chapter 121. Flesh and Bones. Kuang. A giant worm stretched out. A huge hole appeared in front of the dungeon where thousands of creatures were pouring out of it. For the sake of our god. There was an existence leading the monsters. A demon in Okuyo's faction, Azuman. His soul had been assimilated with 12 demons. He viewed almost all the other demons as equals. Okulo's was their god, and as a tribute to him, Azuman painted his face gold. Not one bit of Azuman's soul would eventually remain. Over time, his mind would be crushed into dust. But right now, he still had some individual thoughts. Gruk, Gruruk. A large number of orcs were at the entrance to the dungeon. Sik moved the creatures outside. However, this couldn't stop the aggression of the orcs. Blame your master. Azuman pulled out a green bow. A strong wind pressure rose as the bowstring was pulled back. But there wasn't the sound of an explosion as the bowstring was released. Gurik. Instead, air bubbles formed on the shoulders of the orcs. Although they tried to hurriedly remove them with their hands, the air bubbles didn't disappear. The air bubbles just got bigger. Pung. They burst with a large sound. However, it didn't end with just popping. Monsters made of green vines emerged from the bodies of the orcs, tearing them apart. Our god wants to rule this dungeon. Accept it quietly. Kiek. The green monsters bit at random. Soon thousands of creatures rushed inside. The full-scale invasion began. The top floor of China's dungeon. Sik's face was red and she was fidgeting restlessly. Sik. These bad people. It is foul to have so many invading. Azuman and his creatures were coming up towards the top floor. There were many of them and their quality was also good. China's dungeon was barely ready, but this treatment was too harsh. If they were only lower-grade creatures like orcs or gargoyles, then she would be able to stop them. That wicked girl Yihi. I asked her for help, so why isn't there any reaction? Sik. That bad girl. Sik was afraid. She had completed a dual contract. If the dungeon core was broken, then she would vanish. She would disappear without leaving even a piece of her soul behind. Therefore she had to give up her pride to ask for help, but Yihi didn't answer her. The enemy was advancing too fast. Despite the defense, at this rate the creatures would reach the top floor in less than an hour. Sik, sniffle. Tears and a runny nose occurred thanks to her fear. In fact, Sik was very timid. There was a ranking among the fairies. Sik used anger as a way to hide her fear. Sniffle. I don't want to disappear. No. Sik wiped away the leaking tears with the back of her hand. A fairy couldn't die. Even if they received a severe blow, a fairy would just return to nature. The fairy would spend billions of years trying to restore themselves. There was no guarantee that their original ego would recover, but they wouldn't die. However, extinction was different. They would be deprived of all opportunities. There was no way to recover. An instinctive fear prevailed. Her eyes turned to the hologram floating above the dungeon core. The red dots had reached the 28th floor. China's dungeon had 29 floors, so there was only one remaining. Yihi, that bad girl. I also hate master. Right. A voice was suddenly heard. Sik's eyes widened as she turned her head. The magic circle to move between dungeon cores had been activated. Furthermore, Sik saw a very welcome presence. The person who ruled 3 dungeons. The dungeon master. He showed up with strong creatures. The current status of the enemies? Sik replied to the question. The 28th floor, they've reached it. I came just in time. Master, are you going to stop them? Naturally. The dungeon master just laughed. They set foot in here without permission. I will obliterate them. I had thrown Okuyo's arm in front of the China dungeon. Okulo's had certainly found the specific location of the dungeon through the arm. Otherwise, there was no reason to hit this place first. Anyway, he tried to destroy this place while the owner wasn't home, and that would cost him. Coming to China, he mistakenly thought it was my headquarters. His strategy was planned around a mistake. A demon and 2,000 creatures. This was enough to take over an empty house. Azuman. No. Should I call you Okulos? He is my god. I am Azuman, a faithful follower. I faced Azuman and his creatures near the entrance to the 29th floor. The numbers on Azuman's side were overwhelming. However, my side was superior in terms of quality. It seems like the assimilation hasn't been completed. There wasn't a lot known about assimilation, but there was no focus in Azuman's eyes. He gave off the feeling that he was looking elsewhere. Okulos and the other demons. All of them were looking at the current situation as well. Azuman clicked his tongue and said, "This would have been the perfect raid. How did you notice? Isn't it an obvious plan to attack the dungeon while I am busy at the Demon World auction? If you knew, then you would have been more prepared. Your current appearance, it seems like you were in a hurry. Then victory lies with me. You will know soon enough." I started laughing. Those who were weak commonly exaggerated in front of their enemies. For those with true power, having fewer numbers wouldn't be a problem. More than anything, trying to catch me by surprise wasn't a success. Randolph Briggseel, you can't join the ranks of evolution. Our God does not want you. All of you can enjoy evolution on your own. It won't change the fact that I am a hunter. I pulled out wrath, Kuong. At the same time, Lightning God let out a howl as it emerged. Azuman's arms intersected with the bow. His quick fire skill aimed towards me. Is it because of assimilation? He seems a little bit stronger. The skill itself wasn't a big threat to me. Intelligence was related to anti-magic power and I had 93 points. I was immune to quite a few skills. But the speed was unusual. Due to the soul assimilation, his power seemed to be enhanced. If this also happened with Okulos, then it would be very troublesome. You have crossed the line. However, there is a limit when you are alone. Based on the tone, I guess those are Okuyo's words. Is your identity becoming a little hazy? Shut up, Paysak. A magic arrow passed right next to me. It only scratched my cheek a little bit, but air bubbles formed. I frowned as I touched an air bubble. It felt like something inside the air bubble was trying to take root. It wasn't big, but it didn't seem wise to let it continue. It would have been easier if I had the Wrath or Sloth skills, but they disappeared after receiving the third set item. I still didn't know what corruption did. However, Azuman wasn't someone that I needed to use such a skill on. The defense on the right is lax. He was moving his right arm like it was unfamiliar. The right arm I cut off of Okulos was clearly having an effect. It was a weak point. I should take advantage of it in order to win faster. Dark Sword. The sword was locked in darkness. Everything cut by the skill couldn't be healed. Quack. It cut the flying magic arrows. I circled Azuman and persistently aimed for his right side. This guy. Azuman obviously knew what I was doing. But it was impossible to stop even if he knew. Plus, I wasn't the only one aiming for Azuman. Kuong. An attack that I prepared beforehand struck while Azuman was nervously concentrating on me. Lightning God made contact with Azuman's left ankle. Kuik. He tried to avoid it, but the ankle immediately disappeared. Azuman's body twisted and he collapsed. I approached and looked down on him. Azuman, Okulos, you are my prey. Prey will never win over the hunter. It doesn't matter how strong you are. This is just the beginning. We have the same idea. This is just the beginning. Puik. Even the right ankle was cut off. Kuik. Now it is more balanced. Once I completely blocked him from escaping, I looked around. Indeed, the overwhelming difference in numbers was being overcome. The creatures couldn't pierce through and were coming to a standstill. Of course, they could become dangerous if left alone. I had to alter the mood before that happened. Demonstrating an existence with absolute power. It was more than I imagined. I started to play with the 2,000 creatures. Azuman was collapsed and couldn't help. The creatures fought with determination, but they very rarely fought desperately. Kuong. Kuong. The frightened ogres quickly left the battlefield. Hundreds of creatures followed them. I had instantly taken away their power. The only ones left were the rabble. This is a waste of time. Go and clean them up. Please leave it to me, Dungeon Master. I will clean them up within 10 minutes. Krasla brandished his red spear. I'll do it. Clean up. The energetic Gigantes wielded an enormous club to devastate the enemy. A wave of magic power swept over the creatures every time he moved his club. The golems hadn't participated in this fight since their goal was to stop anyone from interfering. Thanks to that, I managed to handle Azuman quickly. It took less than 10 minutes to clean up the remaining creatures. Once the throat of the last troll was pierced, Krasla returned and went down on one knee. Blood covered his body, but his attitude showed that he didn't care. All of the enemies have been wiped out. Lead the remaining troops and take care of the fleeing creatures. There are too many of them for Chrisley to handle alone. Chrisley was leading all the saber tigers. It was a slightly hard task, so the group also consisted of white and black. We will move immediately. Krasla, Gigantes, the Lich, the golems and the remaining creatures headed downstairs. Soon there was only corpses around me. There is one living. I made a correction. It wasn't only corpses. Azuman, who had his ankles cut off, was still knocked out on the ground. He was severely bleeding. He had been left bleeding for 10 minutes. I approached Azuman carefully and grabbed his head. Bam! I strongly slapped his cheeks. After repeating that action multiple times, Azuman's eyelids slowly opened. Kuu, wake up, Azuman. D-E-A-D. He struggled to squeeze out a word. He thought he was dying, but unfortunately, I wasn't that generous. I bent down to Azuman's ear and said, "No, you're not dying. You won't die until you feel the pain of your soul being torn." Wouldn't making Azuman tattered also deal a blow to Okulos? I was very curious. The souls might be assimilated, but that didn't mean they were safe. I smiled as I imagined Okulos bending over from the pain of his bones being broken. And Azuman trembled as he saw my smile. Chapter 122 to 123. Yihi's Bizarre Adventure. I was born on the battlefield. I spent decades on the battlefield. The survival rate on the battlefield was less than 1%. Even when all the people I could consider as allies died, I managed to survive. Therefore, I was familiar with torture. Please. Azuman was in such a crushed state that it was difficult for him to speak. He had been stripped and his guts were hanging out. His ears and nose had been cut off. Both eyes? They had completely disappeared. The feet were tortured and Lightning God constantly burned the flesh. There was a simple reason why he hadn't died yet. The high-class potion made by grinding the leaves of the tree of origin. There was no way I would let him die so easily. Azuman, your god has no power now. Kill me? It had already been 10 hours of torture. I had done everything I could do, and Azuman's mind had collapsed. Okuyo's power would also be reduced. This is enough. The pain I could inflict had reached its limit. Pack. I swung wrath towards his head. Instant death. Azuman's body twitched once as he died. However, I had no intention of letting Azuman go comfortably. I turned my head and spoke to the Lich that followed me. Lich, take the head filled with magic power. This will give you a good source of magic power. Understood. The Lich has a habit of pausing when talking. In other words, Azuman would be used to make a staff. His body would receive eternal suffering. I was curious about what Okuyo's expression would be if I showed it to him. Kuu. At that moment, a crack began to open. The items purchased from the auction started showing up one by one. I guess it comes to the dungeon that I am near. Originally I received everything in the South Korean dungeon. But right now, I was in the dungeon in China. The dungeon that the goods were transferred to seemed to depend on my location. We are the Kerr warrior clan. Where is our master? A loud voice rang out in the dungeon. A bipedal species with the legs of a horse, torso of a bull and head of a human. The Kerr warriors were the first ones to show up. The leader saw me standing before Azuman's body and laughed. Torture. The Kerr warriors are also very fond of torture. Noisy. My spirit was still a little sharp from the torture. The Kerr leader frowned slightly before bowing his head. Master, I'm sorry. This is the normal voice for the Kerr clan. I didn't know because they had been quiet at the auction. They were compliant when purchased, so quite a few could have defects. The Kerr warrior clan consisted of 100 people. Each one was equivalent to an intermediate 5 LV creature. There were some advanced level warriors mixed in, so I didn't hesitate to purchase them. Well, it is okay as long as they enjoy fighting. I would pay attention to them. As long as they followed commands well, I would let something small like this go. Hi-hiing. My attention turned away from the Kerr clan. 100 infernos had shown up through the crack. The firehorse inferno. They weren't herbivores. They ate monsters like goblins, orcs and even trolls. There were 100 of them. However, I didn't purchase them simply to increase my numbers. I heard that the Kerr warriors can ride horses, so your combat capabilities should greatly rise. That's right, we can hunt twin-head ogres when riding an inferno. I nodded. I heard that the Kerr clan lived in remote areas. Everyone said about them, a species that becomes much stronger when riding a good horse. There was a legend that a Kerr warrior riding a Pegasus managed to hunt a hydra alone. In other words, the Kerr clan were a horseback riding species. Excellent. There was no doubt that they would play a large role when hitting Okuyo's dungeon. The next item to appear through the crack was the Lich Gaparam. I can feel a strong aura of death. It doesn't feel very pleasant. Is this a dungeon? As a lich, shouldn't you be familiar with the aura of death? Gaparam gave a small smile and shook his head. Don't compare me with other shallow lich. I became a lich for my research, but my foundation is as an alchemist. My work deals with life, not death. Hallow, lich? Unfortunately, there was another lich close by who heard it. The lich couldn't accept such derogatory words. Gaparam just continued. I take back the word shallow. I meant to say a rotten lich. Do you want to die? Fighting is for savages. Master, give me permission. The lich looked at me. He didn't want to fight in my presence, so he asked for my permission first. I don't allow it. The lich gave a low bow. I said to Gaparam, don't cause problems in my dungeons. Do you understand? I know. I will put up with it for the research. It was a vague tone of voice that felt slightly disrespectful. But I wasn't bothered by the tone. I am greatly looking forward to the results of your research. Thank you. To be honest, paying 500,000 points for me shows that you recognize the worth of my research. I have become more motivated. You won't regret this, I assure you. I will create the strongest homunculus and help Master become the devil. That is reassuring, so I wanted to say this. As I said at the auction, I need a workshop. Gaparam trailed off. Did he need 2 million points? That number wasn't a burden for me. I will give you a place soon. As expected, Master recognizes my value. Gaparam whistled happily. At first glance, he didn't look like a lich. Leather and internal organs were attached to create a human face. It showed a great and versatile talent. The crack opened once again. The Naga Queen, Dwarf King and 5 Krakens subsequently emerged through the crack. Swick. SWIK. The Naga Queen's tail made a sound as she twisted around my body. It might seem like rude behavior, but I knew she was trying to learn my body odor, so I left her alone. The Naga Queen moved for approximately 20 seconds. Next, her tail and body lowered to the ground. A submissive posture. The Dwarf King bowed with a dour expression. He could be distinguished from the other dwarves by his blue beard. Apart from that, there wasn't much difference. The 5 Krakens didn't show any movements. Maybe it was because there was no water. But that alone was enough. My first thought when seeing the Krakens was, big. The smallest Kraken I had seen was at least 60 meters large. I now had 5 of them. The top floor of the dungeon was high and wide, but it seemed full. They are invincible in the sea. There were very few existences that could win against the Kraken in the sea. Even a dragon wouldn't easily touch a Kraken in the sea. I could rest assured about the defense if I placed them in a sea terrain. Swa. The crack fluctuated even further. Now, the last one. My lips curled up at the thought. Mago. A high-level creature greater than the Griffin and Gigantes. Mago's eyes watched me. All the auction items were moved to the dungeon in China, so I would use it as a base to advance. All my preparations to attack Okulos was finished. Chrisley had brought all the major creatures over. I was prepared to move straight away after receiving the auction items. Master. Yihi really doesn't deserve this. The Fairy Knight's sword. Yihi is still not qualified for it. Yihi was here as well. Yihi didn't like sick, but I needed to give her the Fairy Knight's sword. In your case, it is sufficient. Yihi had been upgraded to an origin fairy. She was qualified for it. But, the Fairy King only grants this sword to one fairy. The last time the Fairy King gave it to someone was more than 20,000 years ago. Yihi, but I am glad to see it. Yihi, yes master, take it, yes? Yihi hesitated before grasping the Fairy Knight's sword with closed eyes. It was 30 centimeters in length, so it was more like a skewer than a sword. However, it was quite long when considering a fairy's size. The moment that Yihi firmly grasped the Fairy Knight's sword, light poured out from the sword and formed a small door. The door then sucked Yihi in. The Fairy Knight's sword will test the fairy, Yihi. The fairy, Yihi, will be moved to the examination room. I never expected this. A forced move took place. There seemed to be a separate place for the examination. I tried to use the fairy's blessing to talk to Yihi, but there was only deafening silence. My dungeon master. Fairy Nim has disappeared, Chrisley said with wide eyes. It isn't a big deal. She had disappeared and the connection had gone dead for some reason. There was nothing I could do. I just had to hope that she would return unharmed. It might be cruel, but there was a chance she could take a long time and I still had many things to do. I can't waste even a moment. I didn't know Okuyo's true intentions. Okulos had sent a raid group but there was no telling what he was doing during this time. Besides, Okulos had seen my status window. He would have surely spotted the title of Dungeon Hunter. He might have sensed that residual points could be obtained from dungeons. In order to alleviate my anxiety, I needed to move quickly against Okulos. Krasla, take it, thank you. Intense curiosity was in Krasla's eyes as I passed him the dragon armor. Tashmal was given firm conviction and Chrisley the twins' mental rapport. The twins' mental rapport would be used with the Dark Elves Roy and Rose. Yeehee, this is an opportunity to show your abilities. A creativity that no one could imagine. If Yeehee possessed the strength then she would pass the test. Although I was still nervous, there was nothing I could do now. Yeehee held the fairy knight's sword and looked around. A pink world, a sunny valley flowing with sweet honey and all types of cookies. A huge rainbow was floating in the sky while the sun looked like a giant cookie. It was weird to see sunlight coming from a cookie. A pink unicorn was playing in a unique field of pink mushrooms and pink sunflowers. There were pink dogs, pink cats and even all the cookies were pink. This was a pink garden. A place she had never heard of. Even Yeehee was forced to panic. Eobobo, where is this place? She swallowed her saliva. Her sword-holding hands trembled. She remembered a door forming and then she was dragged to this ridiculous place. How could she not be surprised? Master, where are you? Are you messing with Yeehee? She hid behind a pink bush and saw the dead body of a rat. Rather than master, the only existences around her were the pink unicorn and other pink creatures. Hying Tilda, the unicorn poked out its tongue and its ears were pricked up. The sight of it turning upside down to chew the grass was enough to make anyone think it was crazy. Yeehee won't be safe if I'm caught by that crazy unicorn. I will hide here and watch the situation. Master said to me, enter a cave to avoid getting eaten by tigers? Ah, no, that wasn't it. What was it? She fell into a state of panic. Several thoughts passed through her head as she tried to ignore the reality. But time passed and the pink unicorn was still there. Even the sun was still cookie-shaped. I will count to 1,000,000. The unicorn will surely be tired and go to a different place by then. 1, 2, 3, 599. 1, 2, 3. Once she repeated from 1 to 99 hundreds of times, the unicorn finally started to move. Hying Tilda, it was peeing. It furiously urinated all over the place. The urine spread out from the unicorn's body like a fountain. That unicorn really is crazy. By the way, Master is bigger. Master has 2 big weapons. Now it has increased to 3. Overall, it is Master's victory. Yeehee. Yeehee clapped as she compared the protruding parts. Yeehee showed strong interest in anything related to Master. However, that fun only lasted a short time. Yeehee was in an unknown place with a scary unicorn so she quickly became exhausted. She slowly closed her eyes from the fatigue. Hying, Master, I want to see you. Yeehee will work hard in the future. Don't throw Yeehee away, yawn. Yeehee scratched her belly and drooled. In her dreams, she was running through the flower garden while holding hands with Master. Between the ha-ha-has and ho-ho-hos, both of them looked happy. Master, I am Yeehee. In fact, I like Master. She made a small, pretty bouquet and handed it to Master. Master smiled as he received the bouquet and patted Yeehee on the head. Me too, Yeehee. I felt feelings of love from the moment I first saw you. Ah, Master, Yeehee has been yours since the beginning. Even the gods can't tear our love apart. I will become the devil and Yeehee will sit next to me. You will be by my side forever. I will always be happy if my hands can pat your head and touch Yeehee's beautiful hair. Yeehee, Master stroking my head is the thing I love best in this world. Yeehee, in the future, don't scold Yeehee. Yes, of course, I will expand your garden. You can annoy the bees to your heart's content. Yeehee, this as well? I will praise you every day. Yeehee, I will stroke your head at least 100 times. Yee. She was happy. She wished this time would go on forever. However, there was one thing. By the way, Master. Why are you licking Yee's cheeks with your tongue? Master? Why is your face suddenly pink? No. Yee's eyes widened as she woke up and shot upwards. There was no lush flower garden or master whispering words of love. Pant, a dream. It is lucky. Master's face didn't turn pink. She was so surprised that sweat was flowing down her face. She wiped off the sweat with the back of her hand. What? Why is it so sticky? However, the liquid she wiped away wasn't sweat. She frowned as she thought about it. Huang. In the next moment, she felt something breathing next to her. At the same time, something licked Yee's cheek. Yee turned to take a look and froze. Hyang tilde. The pink unicorn had poked out its tongue and was wildly waving its head. Hyang tilde. Head bang. The unicorn's head moved from side to side, up and down without stopping. It was disgusting. There was a runny nose and tears. Hyang tilde. Were her wings wet with saliva? They couldn't be unfolded. She couldn't fly. Yee started to quickly run on her 2 little feet. And the pink unicorn calmly followed after her. Don't follow me. Yee isn't tasty. Yee was desperate. She recklessly ran through the pink forest. After tens of minutes, Yee's expression became increasingly more exhausted. This can't continue. That perverted unicorn will eat me. The good news was that the unicorn wasn't in sight. It would catch up soon, but she still had a chance. Yee quickly looked around the area. I will hide over there. At the bottom of a hill, there was a small cave in a blind spot. At first glance, it seemed like an appropriate place to hide her body. Yee quickly ran into the cave. Weiyu tilde. That was hard. Yee doesn't have the strength to walk anymore. She leaned back against the cave wall and massaged her feet. She couldn't remember the last time she had run somewhere. No, this was actually the first time. She was always obstinate about flying. After a short break, Yee started to examine the cave. A strange-looking cave. There are a lot of huge mushrooms. Of course, the mushrooms were pink. Still, all of them looked different and it stimulated Yee's curiosity. I need to go further inside. Yee needs to find a safe place for Yee to defend herself. Kungcha. Yee slowly and painfully got to her feet. As she went deeper inside, the mushrooms seemed to grow even larger. After walking for approximately 30 minutes, a huge vacant lot appeared. In the heart of the vacant lot was a huge mushroom surrounded by various other mushrooms. Wa tilde. Unbelievably large. Great mushroom. Yee. She approached it and tapped the bottom. Bouncy. The texture was soft. Yee thought it was fun and constantly poked the mushroom with her finger. Kawang. Soon, the cave began to shake. The giant mushroom started to move. Igamonina. Yee quickly moved back at the angry roar. She was at a loss as she saw eyes and a mouth on the giant mushroom. How dare a stupid fairy invade the mushroom kingdom? The mushroom king named Mushroom will not forgive you. Mushroom. Intruder. Mushroom. Kill. Mushroom. The mushrooms in the surrounding areas also rose. Yee, who was suddenly trapped, trembled. What did Yee do? The mushroom king said, HMPH, an intruder shouldn't talk. Die. Mushroom. Kill. Mushroom. Small mushrooms surrounded her. Yee earnestly implored with her hands. Spare me. Mushroom. She would get eaten. Master. Yee closed her eyes. It wasn't necessary to stroll through the flower garden, but she at least wanted to see Master's face. It was at that moment. Hyang tilde, a prince charming on a white horse. No, just a horse. The unicorn. It slaughtered the mushrooms with its horns and quickly stood in front of Yee. Nothing happened, so Yee opened her eyes to find the unicorn. The perverted unicorn? Hyang tilde. Don't tell me you came here to rescue Yee? Hyang. Yee was impressed. The unicorn she called crazy and perverted had come to the cave to save her. Yee was mistaken. Aren't you a really good unicorn? Hyang. Then will you take Yee out of this cave? Hyang. You won't? You want Yee to defeat these mushrooms? Hyang. Yee is weak. Hyang tilde. It is possible if it is Yee? You understood. I'll try it. She raised the fairy knight's sword. After a deep breath, Yee recalled Master's movements. He had a beautiful appearance as he used the sword to slaughter the enemy. She was ecstatic just thinking of the movements. Yap! Yi gave a large cry as she waved the sword. I'm sorry. The mushrooms were weak. Only the Mushroom King had a large size. Once a few mushrooms were pierced with the sword, he groaned with pain and apologized. You are the fairy of the legends. The one holding the fairy knight's sword. The fairy of the legends? What is that? Yi was confused. Then Mushroom said, yes, a legend has been passed down in the Mushroom Kingdom and Cookie Kingdom. A fairy holding the fairy knight's sword will appear to save the world from the Pink Queen. Save the world from the Pink Queen? Yi can't do such a huge task. Don't say that. Fairy Nim is our only hope. Just thinking of what happened when the Pink Queen caught ordinary mushrooms and cookies really brings me to tears. But, I can't do it. Instead, why don't you send Yi back to her original world? I will talk to Master and he will solve your problem. Mushroom blinked. Your original world? Ah, the legendary fairy must come from another world. The Pink Queen will know the answer to your problem. Yi touched her jaw. She picked up this habit from Master. However, she wasn't able to find a solution like Master. She just had to try it. It is really possible for Yi? It is hard for now. But if you wear the legendary treasures from the Mushroom Kingdom and Cookie Kingdom, you will have a chance. Plus, you have the legendary unicorn. Victory is certain. Hying tilde. The unicorn was still moving its head. Honestly, it was scary. It also splashed saliva everywhere. The fact that it had a good nature was a separate fact. Yi didn't have any confidence as she looked at it. Yi ignored the unicorn and asked another question. Then what is the Cookie Kingdom? Mushroom sighed. Right now it is different, but we were brethren in the past. After the Pink Queen turned the Cookie King into the sun, they gave up on all attempts at diplomacy. Now they just stare up at the sun every day while working. Please, please save both of us. Mushroom, please, Mushroom. Thousands of mushrooms said it all at once. They looked pathetic even to Yi. The Cookie King had become the sun. The cookies had to stare at him all day long. Yi felt like it was her story. It was similar to the way Yi wanted to look at Master every day. She also had a lot of confidence after using the sword against the mushrooms. The word, legend, gave her some momentum. I can return to my world after slaying the Pink Queen? Understood. Leave this to Yi. Yi hit her chest and said confidently. Chapter 124 to 125, Demon Predator. Hyen Moon's necklace. The owner was a master swordsman and wearing the necklace taught a powerful sword technique. Ariel Diablo had obtained it in my previous life, using the advanced proficiency to conquer her enemies. But now it was mine. I owned it, not anyone else. I placed the moon-shaped necklace around my neck. At the same time, the Hyen Moon's necklace has been worn. The secret sword technique, Moonlight Falling, epic, passive, has been learnt. A refreshing aura covered my body. The blue light around my body resembled that of the moon. Today was a full moon. This was the perfect day to experiment with the new sword technique. This is, Moonlight Falling. I accepted the energy. The information about the sword technique slowly entered my head, and I could see Hyen Moon. He had a beast-like body. His hair looked like it hadn't been cleaned in a while and he had a beard. He wore worn clothes and walked forward with two swords in his hands. The image of the sword technique demonstration was etched into my retinas. I admired the beautiful sword trajectory as it moved in the moonlight. Beautiful. I had that thought while watching the swords move. It couldn't be compared to the dancers who moved holding swords. Every single movement was important. It was beautiful, but the sword also pierced the heart and head of the enemy. It was a new experience for me. Swordsmanship on an entirely different level. In my previous life, the moonlight falling that Ariel used was intense. However, it wasn't beautiful. She had probably reassembled moonlight falling according to her own color. She knew tens of thousands of sword techniques. She absorbed everything and turned it into Abyss Sword. Hyen Moon's sword technique was just one part of this. I will leave it as it is. My thoughts were different. I didn't know any proper sword techniques. They were given to me during actual combat. A technique to split the flesh of the enemy. Simple ways to break the enemy's bones. That was it. I thought that was enough. Swordsmanship? I hadn't felt the need for it. This bias changed after seeing Hyen Moon performing Moonlight Falling directly. This was complete by itself. There was no need to make any changes to it. Of course, there would be differences based on the interpretation. I lagged behind significantly when it came to actually using Moonlight Falling. But if I kept learning Moonlight Falling, I was confident that I would break the wall on my own. In fact, my swordsmanship had been stagnant for more than 10 years. My abilities rose as I became stronger, but there was no change in the techniques themselves. So I wanted to learn. I wanted to absorb it. Ariel reassembled it, but I didn't want to destroy the purity of the original owner, despite my lacking skills. Hyan, I will carry your method forward. I stretched out my hand. Hyan Moon's movements imprinted in my retinas were carried out through my hands. There was no notion of reality. My hands continued to draw Moonlight Falling. Moonlight fell on me from the full moon, and it felt like a heavy weight was pressing down on me. A prophet, a sword master. He was strong and I respected his purity. Hyan Moon loved the moon. His emotions were contained in falling moonlight. The desire to learn and grow from Hyan Moon filled my head. I am fond of the full moon in the quiet sky. I laughed. I recalled the days spent on the battlefield. A place of slaughter. A place where I couldn't even trust my allies. Still, the moon was the only one on my side. It would never change or betray me. I understood a little bit of Hyan Moon's heart. I held wrath in one hand and the Emperor's sword in the other. And I brandished them until dawn. I couldn't move without a plan. I needed to draw up a plan, divide the troops and give them time to adjust to the items purchased from the Demon World auction. Okulos was a Grand Duke, so I needed to be well prepared before going against him. You absolutely can't get caught. It is important to monitor the dungeons of Okulos and important demons from an appropriate distance. Send me reports through the crystal ball once a day. I will follow your words, Dungeon Master. Reconnaissance was a must before moving. I used Krasla and a few dark elves for mobility. Okulos knew my status window, but he wasn't aware that I knew the exact location of his dungeon. Your damn arrogance. It will make sure that you aren't prepared. My purpose was to catch him off guard. It wouldn't be long. Meanwhile, I would use this time to gain a little bit of strength. Stein, how is the work of the Dwarf King progressing? He is so amazing. 7 unique level weapons have already been completed. At this rate, the basic preparations will be ready in a fortnight. Once the huge weapon for Gigantes is finished, his power will instantly double. Stein said in a proud tone. Indeed, good blacksmith skills and superior materials meant that decent weapons were created. Thanks to that, the dwarves were growing every day. A fortnight. I couldn't waste that valuable time. After completing some urgent tasks and learning Moonlight Falling, I pulled out the rest of the items. Millennium Stigma, Lightning Orb and Hyan Moon's necklace were all items for my growth. To be precise, they work to increase the impact of Lightning God. Lightning Orb helps lightning-related skills recover. I used Mind's Eye once again to confirm it. Name, Lightning Orb, XU. Description. An orb held in the mouth of a lightning dragon for 100 years. Asterisk strengthens the electrical properties of unique skills. The user's electrical magic power can be restored once a day. Asterisk can grant electrical properties to spirits. Lightning God had a higher rank, so the strengthening effect would have no effect. I was aiming for the recovery and integration options. Lightning God. Move. Lightning God started moving out towards the lightning orb. It wasn't a simple movement. Lightning God felt resistant, but it couldn't go against my orders. After a while, Lightning God finally reached the lightning orb. At that moment, a strong sense of effort could be felt, but I ignored it. This was work that required intense concentration. Lightning Elemental, Epic, has entered the Lightning Orb, XU. The spirit rating is very high. The effect will be enhanced. The name will be changed to Lightning Orb, Lightning God. The efficiency of Lightning Elemental, Epic, has increased. The consumption of materials for its use has been reduced by half. Then I pulled out the Millennium Stigma. This was an item that formed a type of contract. After connecting Lightning Orb and Lightning God, the duration that I could use it for had increased. Do humans call something like this a trick? My eyebrows furrowed. Some people might call it a trick. No, it isn't. It was finding a method and taking advantage of it. I grabbed onto the chance. Once I confirmed that Lightning God had completed the change, I placed the seal around my heart. Millennium Stigma has been activated. Lightning Orb, Lightning God, and the Heart of the Hell Monarch have been linked. Lightning God will always manifest in the future. When the skill is not in use, it is possible to use 1/10 of the spirit's power. Millennium Stigma has been destroyed after being used. The stigma was a one-time item. However, the effect was enough. After a while, a small fist-sized dragon made of lightning appeared out of the lightning orb. Lightning God. It was surprised by the sudden situation and quickly looked around. The strength is reduced to 1/10, but it is active 24 hours a day. I can also recover the strength when the skill is used. Lightning God would automatically keep protecting me. Originally, Lightning God couldn't voluntarily exit my body. But thanks to Lightning Orb and Millennium Stigma, it could now manifest for 24 hours a day. The small Lightning God moved around my head. It was in a good mood after gaining its freedom. It couldn't be underestimated just because it was the size of a fist. It only had 1/10 of the power, but an advanced creature would still be in danger from one hit. I look forward to it. Lightning God flew faster. Now it is time for the box. It was the last item left from those he purchased at the Demon World auction. The unknown box was waiting for its turn. The box was shaped like a coffin. Chrisley stood in front of it and asked, "My dungeon master, you want me to open this box?" "That's right. The item that comes out will belong to you. I will open it. Please step aside." Chrisley was worried since she didn't know what would come out. However, I shook my head. "It is okay. I will be safe here. I understand." Then, Chrisley took a deep breath and moved. She carefully lifted the lid of the box. A loud sound. It was like someone was roaring. At the same time, a violet light poured from the box. "My dungeon master. This," Chrisley said with perplexed eyes. "Indeed, it turned out like this." I slightly nodded as I checked the result. The preparations were over. The only thing left was to move there. "My dungeon master. Fairy Nim hasn't appeared yet." "I know, but I can't delay it any longer," I said to Chrisley before turning around. All the creatures except those left behind to defend the dungeon were gathered behind me. There were 4,000 intermediate and 100 advanced creatures. There were also 3 high-class creatures. Tashmal was recovering her strength and easily reached the rank of a high-class creature. If I included her, then it would be 4 high-class creatures. It was at a scale that no demon could match. Sweeping away one dungeon would be a cinch. This was 80% of the power that I had gathered in 3 years. In particular, I had considerable expectations for the Kerr clan warriors. They were riding the infernos and carrying weapons created by the Dwarf King. Plus, the clan warriors became stronger when they were together. War. The Kerr warriors also like war. Their voices rang in my ears. War. I would use the momentum of their shouts. The enemy is Grand Duke Okulos. If we delay any longer, then it will become disadvantageous. Lightning fast. Exit quickly after hitting him in the neck. If we miss this opportunity, then it will become more difficult. We have to kill Okulos at all cost. In addition, if he crosses another line, I need to pull out his roots before he becomes more annoying. Krasla had sent me some amazing facts while he was scouting. It was the reason why I was busy in many ways. I wasn't the only target, and Okulos had attacked other dungeons simultaneously. 2 demons from other factions had been dragged inside Okuyo's dungeon. Krasla placed himself at risk and entered the dungeon. And he confirmed that Okulos was a demon predator. It was different from insanity. I was utterly disgusted by the actions described to me. A predator of his own kin. He broke another taboo. Demon predator. That was Okuyo's new title. His soul seems to have gone out of balance because of the assimilation. The original Okulos maintained a moderate position. He didn't do anything extraordinary. Now he had transformed into a dramatic character thanks to the soul assimilation. It was impossible to assimilate other demons without the soul being harmed. It will be a hassle if he grows like me, and I don't know what he will become capable of over time. I could get extra stat points by controlling dungeons and hunting demons. However, Okulos was likely to gain something as well from eating other demons. That was enough for me to move, but I also couldn't guess Okuyo's behavior. I needed to destroy him before he went beyond what I could face. I organized my thoughts and took one step forward. "Follow me. We will destroy the enemy." A large group of creatures started to move from the dungeon in China. Okuyo's dungeon was located in Brazil, South America, so I needed to go by sea. The turtle islands I bought were ready to move. I had purchased an additional 9 turtle islands. They were big enough to be called small islands and 10 of them could carry 5,000 creatures. Stop. Warning. Don't come any closer. The problem was that the humans had a reaction to the large number of creatures moving. Several thousand humans with tanks blocked their path. There were also dozens of awakened. It had already been 3 years. It was impossible that the humans didn't know negotiating with creatures was impossible. It would have been better if they struck first instead of giving a warning. The creatures were only stimulated by the loud noise. The faces of the humans were filled with tension. It seemed like they wouldn't get out of the way. It was apparent from their attitude and the fact that this place wasn't far from an city. Annoying military. I clicked my tongue. Still, I needed to take care of them if I wanted to pass. This was a Pandora's box that they shouldn't have opened. I had brought thousands of creatures. Their fate was to be brutally trampled on. But if they were trying to buy time to evacuate the buildings, I could waste some time here. I would use the Kerr clan warriors to sweep them away. Master, we will show the strength of the Kerr clan. I'll leave it to you. I coldly accepted. If I used the griffin, then I could quickly clean them up. However, it wasn't bad to look at the combat power of the Kerr warriors. With my permission, the Kerr warriors were all riding infernos. Hi Ra, wipe them out. The 100 infernos that the Kerr warriors were riding kicked off against the ground. They were 3 meters tall. There was also the moderate size of the Kerr warriors. An ordinary human would have to look up to barely see their heads. Kung, Kwarung, the tanks fired. The Kerr clan had never encountered weapons like this before. The Kerr warriors were hit by them. One of the warriors was literally knocked to the ground. But he just got up from the dirt. That hurt me a little bit. The Kerr warrior just laughed like it was a joke and got back on the inferno. Amazing actions followed. The infernos swiftly moved among the humans. Their skins were tough and close to impervious, making the bullets unable to penetrate them. Even the flames emitted from an inferno were fatal for humans. The humans couldn't extinguish the hellfire. This weapon is very good. As expected from weapons made by the Dwarf King. The weapons he made from the roots of the Tree of Origin had a unique rating and were extremely sharp. The Kerr warriors could even slice through a tank. The humans were wiped out in 20 minutes. It was a long time, but that was due to the brutality of the Kerr clan. Despite the person being dead, they would keep slicing the body again and again. Master, slaughter is fun. Yes, I can see. I nodded. The Kerr clan received no damage. There were some minor injuries, but their power was preserved. This isn't all. The true strength of the Kerr clan will only appear when dealing with strong enemies. They were a species specialized in fighting together. This was the Kerr clan. There was also a skill associated with them. Rendezvous, a skill that raised strength and stamina when many Kerr warriors faced an enemy. The Kerr clan warriors are strong. The Kerr clan cried out loudly as they held up their large swords. An attitude like they were showing off. Most of the creatures gathered here took it as a taunt. Chrisley was tired of it but ignored them. On the other hand, Tashmal, who was wearing firm conviction, spat out harsh words. I can't find any dignity. Her tone was filled with thorns. She had been fidgety as soon as she left the dungeon because she was concerned about the baby angels. Tashmal's 3 pairs of black wings spread out in an intimidating gesture. Her stats had recovered quite a bit and she could match high-class creatures. I was resting for a while and had a chance to check Tashmal's growth with mind's eye. Name: Tashmal. Occupation: Fallen Angel. Title: * Angel of Light steeped in darkness. Epic: Intelligence and Magic Power +6. * Firm Conviction. R. Stamina +3. Stats: Strength 77, Intelligence 88, +6. Agility 83, Stamina 79, +5. Magic Power 86, +8. Potential: 413 +19, 471st. Uniqueness: an angel that spread light into the world has now become a fallen angel. The stats have been lowered in the aftermath of losing her wings, but they will quickly recover. Skill: Propagation of Darkness. Epic: Barrage of Dark Spears. Epic: Dark Thunder. Epic. Before and after comparison. Strength 68, Intelligence 93, Agility 78, Stamina 69, Magic 90, Potential 386 +12, 471st. Strength 77, Intelligence 94, Agility 83, Stamina 84, Magic 94, Potential 413 plus 19, 471st. The Firm Conviction Helmet. The helmet increased her stamina by 5 and her magic power by 2. Her stats were more than 430, so she had already surpassed Gigantes and the Griffin. This was almost as strong as a 2LV high-class creature. I wondered what the result would be if she fought the Kerr warriors, but now wasn't the time for that. There is no time to delay. Move to the right. I walked out. I needed to stab a dagger into Okulos before he noticed. Moving with Turtle Island was simple. It dived into the depths of the ocean with a shielding skill. Thanks to that, I was able to reach South America without any interference. Of course, there was one more bridge to cross. I decided to go through Peru. Everything has been destroyed. It wasn't a country with strong military power, so I thought I could easily pass through. But this was completely different from what I expected. There weren't even any ants or puppies, let alone a resistance. All the cities were completely destroyed. The smell of burning flesh and rotting bodies permeated the air. Peru didn't have a dungeon, so I could only guess that Okulos was behind it. My dungeon master. The smell is unbearable. Chrisley pinched her nose. The burning and rotten stench was the worst. It was hard for her superior senses. I opened my mouth and said, "There are no humans visible. Isn't it due to Okulos? You think so as well? The signs are all around us." Did he intend to gather some points? The tragedy had happened not long ago. At best, it was only 1 or 2 months. It was something he clearly did before entering the Demon World auction. However, was it really for points? No. It is not for the sake of points. Chrisley was puzzled by my words. Then, look at the bodies. The area was littered with corpses. They were eaten by insects, rotted or burnt, but were still obviously corpses. Ah, none of them have heads. It wasn't difficult to understand after that. She hadn't been aware because the smell was so bad she turned away. Sacrifices, Tashmal said with a serious expression. I agreed with her. That's right, Tashmal. They are sacrifices to summon something. I couldn't imagine how many sacrifices there were. It was at least hundreds of thousands. Chrisley trembled as she was enlightened. Isn't he a Grand Duke? An existence like that, making all these sacrifices for a summoning. I couldn't act recklessly. I forgot my pride and couldn't easily move. A Grand Duke was strong. They had high standards in other areas, not just strength. Yet he was forced to offer many sacrifices. Especially since I didn't know who he was summoning. It wasn't possible for me to have an extensive knowledge of summoning. Right now, Okuyo's mental state isn't normal. It isn't strange that he would do something like this. This is really insane. Chrisley concluded with disgust. Soul assimilation. Kin predator. A summoning ritual. Judging by the scale of the ritual, it won't be easy. But I also couldn't stay put. A Grand Duke was a presence that I couldn't leave alone. I didn't want to. I hoped to knock my opponent down from his position. At the very least, Okulos was within a short reach. A fight between a predator and a hunter. I formed fists. It would be hard, but that didn't mean it was impossible. Wide plains. Hundreds of thousands of human skulls were skewered. Accumulation of cruelty. Okulos grinned as he looked over it. Soon a magic circle was invoked on the whole plains, and a huge mountain-like shadow appeared. Who summoned nothingness? Nothingness. Something that no one knew or could explain. A shadow of nothingness was summoned. It is good to meet you. I am the one who summoned you, Okulos said to the shadow. Then he turned his attention to the shadow of nothingness. Are all those heads my food? That's right. Feel free to eat. I am not satisfied, but I won't refuse this big portion. Kawang. It wasn't a mere shadow. The shadow moved over the land. The shadow swallowed up the entire plains. In the blink of an eye, all the heads instantly disappeared. Hoo. Okuyo's smile widened. The ritual sacrifices had been completed. The existence that no one knew about was now in his hands. Okulos lost any fear. Now victory was his. Chapter 126 to 127. Shadow of Nothingness, Contigonam. After going through Peru, we safely made it to the dungeon in Brazil. It was just as horrible as Peru. Dungeon Master, I, Krasla, have come to greet you. Krasla and several dark elves approached. They had covered themselves in dirt and straw to monitor Okuyo's dungeon. Are there any noticeable movements? Krasla briefly hesitated at the question before replying. It was only for a fraction of a second, but there was a huge surge of magic power inside the dungeon. It disappeared instantly, so I thought I was mistaken. At the same time, the movements of the creatures reduced. It clearly had a negative impact on the creatures in the dungeon. My eyebrows rose. The summoning was successful. I had no clue at all about what was summoned, and without any hints, I was bound to feel some fear. Despite the information from my previous life, I was now moving in complete ignorance. Good job. However, I didn't hold back on my praise. Krasla and the Dark Elves had suffered without sleeping for the last fortnight. Thank you. I ignored their bows and took out Wrath and the Emperor's sword. The dungeon was close enough for them to notice me. If Okulos felt danger, then it was highly likely that the creatures and demons would start moving. I was already committed to destroying the enemy. I had a clear goal and objectives. There was nothing else to say. Krasla, and Tashmal, all the preparations were finished. Yes, words weren't necessary. The only thing left was speed. Let's go. I ran towards the dungeon. Giant ants emerged from the ground. They were the lowest grade, war ants. They weren't anything to worry about on their own, but hundreds of thousands gathered together were a lot stronger. It was normal to be careful, even if they were lower grade creatures. But I needed to act quickly. Someone might have ordered them to buy some time. Rushing so recklessly, it was different from the creature's normal behavior. Griffin. Keek. Despite suffering a serious injury against infinite flesh, the griffin had completely recovered. Dust shot up as fire and lightning, epic, hit the ground. Kwa ru rung. It was utterly amazing. A whole bunch of war ants immediately melted. Despite their numbers, they were only lowest grade creatures. They were no match for the griffin. The ants were destroyed without even a trace left behind. The Kerr clan hunted the few remaining war ants. The time that it took? Less than 5 minutes. They completely finished it. The enemy was wiped out and we moved on straight away. Krasla had figured out the path in advance, so it was easy to move up. But I didn't see any more war ants until the 5th floor. Ant Cave. Okuyo's dungeon was an ant cave. All his creatures were ants. The 6th floor. It was the first time there was a change. A storage for eggs. There were tens of thousands of ant eggs. Guardian ants were beside the entrance. Low-grade 3 LV creatures. They were larger than normal war ants and had much sharper mandibles. Their speed and power couldn't be ignored. Burn it. The guardian ants were low-grade creatures. Destroying the eggs' storage wasn't a problem. The dungeon was wider than it seemed, so even using the griffin's fire and lightning skill would take a long time. However, I also had 3 fire golems. In this situation, there was no need to keep them back from burning the eggs' storage. The fire golems ignored the guardian ants, despite the assault from the sharp mandibles. It reached the climax. Kung, Kuuong. After receiving my command, the fire golems only moved for the goal. The ground shook every time their heavy bodies moved. Wack. Flames shot out from the fire golem's hands. The eggs' storage couldn't survive the firepower. The guardian ants rushed at the fire golems but were just melted down. It was impossible for them to attack. It was easy. There was nothing hidden. At this rate, it wouldn't be too difficult to reach the top floor. I was slowly climbing up the dungeon. Isn't it time that he noticed? More than 5,000 creatures entered. There was plenty of time for the owner of the dungeon to notice. But there were no movements. Was he encouraging me to come? Or he was confident that I wouldn't be able to rise? Whatever the reason, I couldn't relax. I couldn't know the truth about Okulos, but that wasn't necessarily bad for me. The 11th floor. Intermediate level creatures emerged. The gigantic ants were intermediate 3 LV creatures. Their whole body was covered with specific, hard materials that looked like armor, making the ants quite tricky. Furthermore, they spat out chemical ingredients from their mouth like human machine guns. Quang, quang. There was a loud sound. Over 100 gigantic ants were heading towards the entrance. The advanced golem's forward movement was stopped. The chemicals emitted by the gigantic ants were damaging to them. There would be an explosion from the chemicals and it would penetrate towards the nervous system. The flame-resistant griffin also moved forward. Its skill was used efficiently. The only problem was that the griffin couldn't discharge it that often. Naga Queen. Swayek. With the tail of a snake and the upper body of a beautiful woman, she was a strong powerhouse among the advanced 5LV creatures. The Naga Queen moved along the walls and floors quickly. Her sharp teeth and potent poison melted away the armor of the gigantic ants. Ha! The Naga Queen breathed out purple smoke towards the gigantic ants in front of her. The fog spread out. It was the skill, Poison Spray, XU. The purple fog touched the gigantic ants and melted them down. Their solid armor and powerful weapons were useless in front of the Naga Queen. This battle also reached its climax. Now I just need to hunt the queen. I had encountered war ants, guardian ants and gigantic ants. Their presence meant there would be a queen ant. As I approached the end of the ant cave, Okuyo's preparations were like what I expected. Ant Queen. An ant the size of a golem screamed. Ki! The strident sound echoed. The queen ant was in a miserable state. All her legs were mutilated and her body was covered with mysterious wounds. Gerwong! White roared from his position on top of the queen ant's torso. It was a roar of victory. The end of combat was announced by White biting the neck of the ant queen. Despite the dozens of saber tigers that died, this was a great success. The queen ant can be left to die. My points will be wasted if I don't move. There were no traces of Okuyo's movements. I couldn't tell that a magic circle had been carved. Immediately after the magic circle was activated, there was a surge of magic power intense enough for ordinary humans to feel it. There were no signs that anything like that had happened. Even if Okulos wasn't here, the fairy should have come out to reject me. It was like he just placed a number of creatures to resist. The damage is small. At most, there were 200 intermediate creatures. The real bonus will be cutting that guy's head off. I turned and looked at Chrisley. Have you received contact from the other dark elves? No, my dungeon master. That means the other demons aren't moving. I wasn't only watching Okulos. Dark elves were sent to the dungeons of other demons in his faction. I gave them crystal balls so they could report back. There was no contact, so that meant the demons weren't moving. Therefore, I only needed to pay attention to Okulos. Then, movement. There was movement while I was speaking. Weak. A rough wind blew. Ki. The dying queen ant made frantic sounds. Then the body of the queen ant disappeared in the blink of an eye. There were no signs of it. There was only the wind blowing. This power. Tashmal's wings spread wide open and she activated the skill barrage of dark spears, epic. The spears rushed through the dungeon. Kwang, Kwarurum, Kwakwang. An explosion took place and I could finally see it. Shadow. A shadow. A very large shadow could be seen on the outer wall of the dungeon. Tashmal shouted loudly in dismay. Nothingness. Nothingness? I didn't know what it was but Tashmal seemed shocked. In addition, she was nervous about the shadow. Your presence shouldn't be here. Return. This isn't the place for you. Return? I'm not much different from the original natives of this place. It spoke in an annoyed, bass-like voice. However, Tashmal had a tough attitude. Nothingness can't be called a native. You're not a god. You are just an ungrateful presence that tried to eat God. It was difficult to follow the story. In the first place, I had no idea what nothingness was. This was the first time I had seen the overwhelming presence that was the shadow. It seemed to have existed for a long time. It felt like the first time I had encountered a Grand Duke in the demon world. The shadow wasn't an easy opponent. A powerhouse. I'm not a god? I've heard that for 10 million years. I am the truest god that exists. A fallen angel shouldn't speak on this topic. I still have all the memories from my past lives. You are a god? My god is real. I can't stand any corrupted existences impersonating God. Heeing. The wind grew stronger. Many dark spears floated around Tashmal. I am Kantigonam. I am the true god. The other one is just a fake. You damn fallen angel. Then Tashmal accused him. Bah. It looks like you can't remember anything but your name. Everything else has been lost into nothingness. Supik. The shadow that called himself Kantigonam moved. Quarum. Tashmal responded. Countless dark spears shot towards him. However, the shadow was fast. It wasn't easy to hit him. On the other hand, Tashmal was injured every time the shadow moved. Kantigonam. I consider that name for a while. I had heard it somewhere before. Soon I received a small surprise as I searched through my memories. Kantigonam was king of the Yetis. The king that no Yeti dared refer to by name. He was the ancestor of a cursed yeti sold at the Demon World auction, and his name was also on a helmet in the achievements store. I never thought I would hear that name here. The form of the giant shadow looked similar to a yeti. He must have died and become this. He was in a shadow state. It is certain. I needed to get rid of him in order to move forward. Mago. Whom? This time it was the 2LV high-class creature purchased at the Demon World auction. The one-eyed Mago came forward. Mago regarded the shadow slowly. She had wise eyes that seemed to allow her to see right through the shadow. Fortunately, she is in a normal state. Due to the failed contract with the dark spirits, sometimes Mago would have seizures. They didn't know how to catch a high-class creature, so I was dealing with the result. She would become tired approximately once a week and then calm down. But today she was calmer than usual. Her one eye read everything about Contigonam. Heeing. A gust of wind rose next to Mago, and she hid herself in the wind. Mago's habit was to mix in with the wind. I was reminded of her skills and laughed with satisfaction when recalling her status window. Name. Mago. Stats. Strength 89, Intelligence 93. Agility 92, Stamina 68. Magic Power 93. Potential. 435 446. Uniqueness. Unstable due to the contract. Skill. Perfect Hurricane. Epic, Sage's Eye. Epic, Windtread, Epic. It wasn't a surprising status window for a 2LV high-class creature. The disadvantage was her low stamina, but that didn't matter in the current situation. Mago reappeared behind Contigonam. Her one blue eye was shining as she stabbed the center of Contigonam's hand. Puik, Kua, Contigonam, who had been pressuring Tashmal, screamed. It was the first time an attack had succeeded. Mago used the skill, Sage's Eye, Epic, to examine Contigonam. That was how Mago seemed to know a weak point. Mago's eye alone made it worth buying her. Contigonam jerked back from the unexpected blow. That wasn't the end. Mago pulled strongly on Contigonam's shadow. And the figure hiding in the shadow was revealed. A terrible shape appeared from the shadow. A simple piece of flesh. The eyes, nose and mouth had melted together like he was failing to maintain his form. He was a 6 to 7 meter bipedal species, but he really couldn't be called a normal existence. He lost all shape. Indeed, aside from his memories, it seemed like he had even forgotten what he previously looked like. Something like pus was dripping from his skin, giving off a terrible stench. Bubbles occasionally popped on his body in different places. He was nothing more than a crumbling mess right now. Contigonam urgently covered himself in the shadow again. His ugly appearance was once again hidden in darkness. However, I had clearly seen his shape. Gigantes. I used Gigantes to verify this. Enemy. Win. Kung. Gigantes seemed unstoppable as he moved forward. He was holding the huge club that the Dwarf King made for him. Gigantes was thrilled about using the weapon. He was roughly snorting with excitement at finally being able to play. It was a unique grade weapon with the skill, Instant Acceleration, attached, overcoming some of the disadvantages of its size. Gigantes also wanted to see how quickly he could move. Quakwang. He swung down with the club and accelerated. Gigantes had incredible strength. Normally the floor shook when he just walked, but the result was terrible after acceleration was used. However, the impact wasn't as large as I expected. The shadow-covered Contigonam didn't budge. The shadow was lacking to be called an armor. I will kill all of you. Contigonam flicked out his shadow. The shadow was used to hide his body, but it had a further effect. The shadow swallowed up Gigantes. Cough. Blocked. Out of breath. Let go. The shadow covered his entire body. It slowly entered Gigantes. After making contact with the shadow, it seemed like Gigantes was dyed in darkness. Come out. Don't become stained with nothingness. Kururung. Tashmal struck down with the dark thunder spears, but it wasn't very effective. Like Tashmal, the shadow also had the attribute of darkness, so the effects were cut in half. Mago was busy dealing with Contigonam's main body. And do you come here looking for a coffin? Randolph Brigzeal, Okulos and his creatures slowly approached me. There were the 30-year-old Death Knight purchased at the auction, a bugbear, a dark warrior and 100 advanced creatures. There was an advanced 4LV horned ant king and some gigantic ants. Of course, the one I hated was at the front. Okulos. This guy, what did you summon? A god who was trapped in nothingness. I called out to him. The word, nothingness, popped out to me. Where was it located? Okuyo's smile just intensified. By the way, how did you discover the location of my dungeon? You don't need to know. Indeed, I don't need an explanation. You will become trapped in nothingness and then you will follow my words. His eyes turned towards Gigantes. Gigantes had stopped moving after becoming tinged with darkness. The black shadow flowing around Gigantes, it changed his eyes. The eyes were still hostile but he had changed his target. He was staring at me like he wanted to charge over. Is he being controlled? Hoo. That's right, nothingness is not dependent on the shadow. Randolph Brigzeal, how long before all the high-class creatures you are so proud of are controlled? I highly doubt that it will take more than an hour. Then I guess I should kill you before then. Do you think it will be that easy? You might have earned the title of hunter, but I am a predator. A showdown between a hunter and a predator. I'm trembling just imagining it. It won't be as easy as last time. He proudly spoke about breaking the taboo. I didn't answer him. This was shameful conduct for a Grand Duke. I needed to kill him as soon as possible before the shadow showed any more bizarre effects. I gripped Wrath and the Emperor's sword. The moonlight was fully charged. I had practiced moonlight falling for almost a month. 1 month was nothing compared to High Moon's existence, but that was enough. My dungeon master, give me a command. Chrisley spoke on behalf of the creatures. She was holding a red jewel in her hands. Huong. A ringing sound was constantly emerging from the jewel. It was the item Chrisley received from the unknown box. Break the seal. I will follow your words. Gulp. Chrisley swallowed the red jewel without any hesitation. Suuik. She raised the death wand and produced hundreds of shades. Skeleton soldiers emerged from the ground and a large crow formed on the death wand. The King of Death, Ganak's essence. This was the item that emerged from the unknown box. Chrisley owned the death wand, so the box seemed to release an item related to necromancy. Garnak, the King of Death. He was a necromancer who reached the pinnacle. Those who swallowed his essence could have his strength for a limited time. Chrisley, help stop the enemy from controlling Gigantes. Yes, Krasla, you will lead the creatures. Leave it to me. I have a neck to cut off. The delegation of roles was over. I turned and looked at Okulos. Okulos had already used naturalization and relaxation was on his face. He had a completely different attitude from before. Confidence, arrogance. He was feeling those things. Let's end this, Okulos. Come, Randolph Brigzeal, Kururung. The creatures clashed with each other. I was in the vanguard as I swung my sword towards Okulos. Moonlight falling. It was a sword skill that consumed moonlight to make a sword of light. It increased the destructive power of the sword and also confused the enemy. It was a skill that was compatible with Dark Sword. Become stronger. Ha. Noisy. Okulos was still relaxed. By now, demons from his faction should be heading to this dungeon. Was he thinking of buying time? No, he really believed that he could win. Several branches sprouted from his right arm. A myriad of branches popped out from the ground. They took a similar form to Okulos. It wasn't very different from a clone. So 2 clones were created. Their destructive power could be compared to Okulos. Look, the demons I preyed on have taken on my appearance. Randolph Brigzeal, you will also have the glory of joining their ranks. 3 against 1. 1 was easy. 2 enemies was similar. But 3, that was a little arduous. The 2 clones even used the same skills as Okulos. It was no different from an infinite revival. The injuries inflicted by the Dark Sword didn't recover, but the naturalized Okulos could replace them with other parts. It wasn't the same for the clones. In short, I needed to handle the clones in order to increase the chances of winning. Lightning God. Although he had clones, I also had a powerful army. Gerwong. Lightning God manifested and attacked. The giant lightning dragon rushed towards Okulos. Meanwhile, I dealt with the clones. Quang. My sword struck a long stalk. It had been reinforced so the cut wasn't very deep. However, the whole area couldn't be strengthened. The Emperor's sword struck the side of a clone. Jiang. I had 2 swords but there were 2 clones. They both complemented each other and were pressuring me. If only I had the complete version of High Moon's sword techniques. It would be easy. The practice time I had wasn't enough. More complex moves were required to kill the enemies. My job would be easier if High Moon's swordsmanship was completely learnt. Right now, I didn't have enough power. It isn't easy. The situation was neck and neck. My creatures were a little bit ahead in that showdown. However, Okulos and Contigonam were huge variables. Tashmal was covered in wounds and Mago was busy trying to hold on. At least Chrysley was properly dealing with the shadow-stained Gigantes. If there was one more shadow-controlled creature, the situation was likely to reverse. Time. It was running out, but I couldn't finish this as fast as I wanted. There was another problem. The demons in Okuyo's faction were fast approaching. If they joined, then my odds would become close to zero. It can't be helped. I sighed and took a deep breath. I didn't want to use it, but it seemed like I had no choice. It was the skill I obtained when 3 of the 7 sins set was gathered. It had absorbed the other skills, but I didn't know how to take advantage of it. The description was short and also had a warning attached. But this was the only way. I opened my mouth. Corruption. Chapter 128 to 129. Corruption. Are you sure you want to use corruption, Epic? This was the first time it had asked me again. However, my decision didn't change. I would use it. I slowly opened my mouth. This is the final warning. Corruption. Corruption. Keng. Okuyo's clone aimed for this gap. It became nervous at my shout. The demon, Randolph Brigzeal, has used the skill Corruption, Epic. You have temporarily gone beyond the protective limits of the system. The lock has been released. Until the effect of corruption ends, you can't use all the features of the system. Be careful. Demons outside the protection won't be free of surveillance from heaven. Be careful. Be care. The message windows continuously rose. There were many warning messages. There was no way of knowing what going beyond the protection of the system meant. However, I began to change as soon as corruption was used. It felt like something was breaking through a blockage. My body trembled. 2 horns appeared on my forehead and enormous wings popped out from my back. I grew fur like an animal and my nails became longer. My fair skin was stained black. Strange tattoos were carved on my body. They looked like glowing wounds. And infinity armor was transformed. A dark magic power. It was absorbed and changed the look of the armor. The armor and helmet changed so that they didn't cover the wings and horns. Usually a message window would appear now, but nothing rose. I am out of the system. I also couldn't check my status window. I realized that I was now out of the system. I looked around slowly. My presence alone overwhelmed everything around me. Okuyo's clone showed no more signs of attacking me. Even Contigonam and Mago were looking at me. I feel strange. That's right. It was really strange. I couldn't explain this feeling. The movement of the wings seemed natural. The changes didn't feel awkward at all. It was like I had found my true self. At the same time, I received a great enlightenment. This is a true demon. It was electrifying. Every demon had questioned it at least once. Why didn't demons have wings like angels? The demons looked too similar to humans. Sometimes demons would have horns like Ariel Diablo, but those were rare cases of blood and magic power mixing. So demons hated humans in particular. It was because their appearances were too similar. There were strict differences in power but not appearances. They didn't want to admit it. That's why the demons rejected everything to do with humans. They hated even looking at them. Now, I think I knew the answer. I was a true demon at the moment. The demons lost their horns and wings for some reason, becoming human-like in appearance. Due to corruption, I managed to remove those constraints. This corruption isn't corruption. Unlimited magic power. It was confidence that I could dominate everything. I was definitely not a fallen being. The original appearance of the demons? That is nonsense, Randolph Brigzeal. Okulos gritted his teeth. His relaxation had disappeared. There was infinite hatred in the eyes that looked at me. Why are you so excited? I don't care if you dismiss it as nonsense. I wasn't trying to convince him that this was real. Okulos couldn't accept it. He was staring at me with hate, but there was also envy mixed in. He knew. Thanks to naturalization, he instinctively knew that my current form was the origin of demons. He felt like he had been deprived. No matter his mental state, he was still a Grand Duke. He hadn't lost his pride as a demon. It was natural for him to think it was unfair and to become angry. You broke the taboo. Okulos, you are the one who broke the taboo, not me. That appearance. Alternatively, you are using some type of trick. Evolution? You have crossed the line and truly accomplished evolution. Okulos. He was hung up on evolution. I knew about it. Just a moment ago, I sensed Okuyo's true nature. This wasn't his real character. A need to change. Shortly after, he came up with the possibility of evolution and crossing the line. I developed so rapidly that it wasn't strange he mistook it for evolution. Soul assimilation, demon predator. Maybe, little by little, he realized he had gone down the wrong path. Therefore he summoned the shadow for answers. Things fell into place. How pathetic. My perception about Okulos changed. He was just a maniac. It wasn't insanity. There was no luck and he told a mocking story at the Demon World auction. But there was a misunderstanding. He struggled to find a source. It seemed to have transitioned into an ego trip. He started to crave evil and war. I had felt sympathetic because I still thought of his past self. Even though I didn't like the Grand Dukes, I still felt some respect towards them. In my previous life, he hadn't left a distinct impression. He obtained the first world tree. He showed no motivation and even seemed to neglect becoming the devil. I was the turning point in his attitude. Due to the potential I showed, Okulos took a completely different route from the one he took in my previous life. Okulos was correct to be suspicious about me. In my previous life, I had never shown this power. What is with those eyes? Put them away, or else I will take them by force. I will completely erase you from this world. Your journey is over, Okulos. It was a long journey. Okulos was tiresome. This was his limit. His desire was getting out of hand. Before that happened, I would help him find peace. Okuyo's worries would be eased. I would settle this once and for all. Shut up, Okulos shouted and moved. He ignored Lightning God and his clones. It was indeed a desperate struggle. He was doing everything possible to kill me. However, I had regained my true nature so he couldn't reach me. Huang. I flapped my wings. I seemed to know what to do from now on. The two horns on my forehead were a source of magic power. Different magic power attributes could be substituted. Once the magic power swept out from the horns, it was changed to moonlight magic power. High-end moon. Now it was possible to use 99% of the sword technique. Quack. Wrath and the Emperor's sword moved brilliantly. The movements weren't just to mislead the enemy. Moonlight falling became stronger the more I used it. My eyes can pierce through the world. Why can't I read your movements? Okulos had the skill, Eyes of the World, epic. It was a skill that managed to grasp and reflect back mind's eye. But, this time, Sukung. One clone was removed. He tried to partially strengthen the clone but it was no use. My wings touched a crumbling clone. The clone was melted by the magic power contained in my wings. I can't read it. Okulos bit his lips. Okulos, it is unfortunate but you don't know everything about me. This could sometimes cause failure. There were many cases. Okulos also knew this, making him unhappy. Shut up. Okulos recalled the one remaining clone. Soon, many large trees emerged from its body. The momentum seemed like it would consume the entire floor of the dungeon, as the branches and roots moved like whips. Quang, quang, quaquang. It couldn't be blocked. I spread my wings wide. I flew above the tens of thousands of branches. It would have been impossible in the past, but now I had wings. I flapped my wings and floated in the air. My speed was faster than the whips and I soon reached Okuyo's heart. Now, rest in peace. Puik. I stabbed his heart with wrath and the Emperor's sword. Biddle. I was suddenly tired after handling Okulos. It was hard to keep my balance. Chrisley, who was blocking Gigantes, quickly rushed towards me. Talk. I stopped Chrisley's hands. Was this a side effect of corruption? I didn't trust anyone. I was even hostile towards Chrisley. It was an instinctive aversion. I felt like I was the only one who should exist. My dungeon master, are you okay? Chrisley asked in an anxious tone. I turned my head towards Contigonam. It wasn't the end after handling Okulos. I needed to take care of that guy to be successful. How about the movements of the other demons? It seems like they are almost here. Okuyo's death didn't stop them. The demons in Okuyo's faction. I thought they would stop once he died. It seemed like they were performing his last command or there were other reasons. This was dangerous. I didn't know if I could be controlled, but a vast majority of the creatures here could be victims. They were the foundation of my strength. I had worked hard to build them up in the past 3 years. No, I would rather kill them than have them controlled. Anyway, I alone was sufficient. Yes, alone? Damn, I shook my head. My mental state wasn't normal. At this rate, it was likely that my allies would be slaughtered by my own hands. It was becoming harder to resist. Get out, huh? I will deal with Kantigonam. Immediately leave the dungeon. I can't do that. You will just become obstacles. The creatures will be confused from Okuyo's death, so now is the perfect time. My dungeon master, Chrisley, do you want me to risk myself saving you? You will just be in the way. Huang. I spread my wings. Chrisley looked up at me. She formed tight fists as she tried to be patient. Chrisley then breathed deeply, relaxed her hands and bowed. I will protect this place until my dungeon master comes out. Chrisley, if dungeon master dies, then don't you know that I will die as well? Please don't say such words. A large crow flew away with Krasla and the others. I had ordered them to escape. Krasla had hesitated but decided to retreat after seeing Chrisley's decisive attitude. Fortunately, I was able to maintain my spirit until then. However, I felt my mental state take a nosedive after they left. Grr, my vision darkened. It felt like all my emotions had been worn away until there was only one remaining. A murderous intent. I was like a wild beast looking for food. Saliva dripped from my mouth. My eyes turned red. I started to rip into the creatures nearest to me. Quaduk, Quajijik, they were torn apart like pieces of paper. I grabbed both shoulders and ripped a creature apart. My body was splattered with blood. These actions were repeated so many times that my black skin was completely obscured by the red blood. I dug out their eyes and bit their necks. In order to quench my thirst, fangs broke the skin and started to suck out blood. Grr, pandemonium. This place was like hell. I was recreating a nightmare here. You, what are you? Kantigonam, the shadow of nothingness. In the past, he was the Yeti King, and now he was just ugly. It was a nightmare, but more importantly, I realized how strong he was. My instincts were telling me to relieve my thirst with a stronger opponent. He didn't have a hair out of place even when dealing with Mago. Rather, he was driving Mago to the edge of a cliff. If I left it alone, then she would be defeated. Kantigonam was confident. They were just mortals after all. Once dead, their bodies would just become his subordinates. On the other hand, he was immortal and not bound by death. This was a screenplay he organized in the first place. Considering that, it was understandable that he was confident. Now, it was the first time there was surprise on Kantigonam's face. You are directly opposing nothingness. You don't feel like a god, yet you are trampling on everything. I will have your flesh. In any case, this was the first time. He had thought of my body as just a facade. His prejudice had been broken. He felt astonished and greedy at the same time. He stared at me. It was like discovering an artist with great artworks. I will take you. Once nothingness obtains that flesh, I will become a true god. Kantigonam burst out with excitement. The creatures retreated as they felt his presence. A huge circle was created with Kantigonam and I in the center. I opened my wings. My body was my own and I had no intention of handing it over to anyone else. That was a vain desire. Okulos had also died with his dream unfulfilled. Indeed, both of them were a little similar. Those similar tendencies were probably why the shadow was summoned in the first place. Delicious. Of course, I wasn't thirsty for Kantigonam. I looked at Kantigonam and licked my lips. It wasn't thirst but a desire to eat him up. I was a hunter, he was the prey. A seasoned hunter would win over their prey. Give me your body. The shadow fluctuated. It spread out and pressured me from the front. The attribute of my magic power was once again altered. Whack! Light shot out from the horns. The replacement attribute was surprisingly light. It was a little different but had properties similar to holy power. The light revealed the shadow. The shadow rushing towards me flinched back from the light. Aren't you a demon? Why can you use that? Kantigonam was once again shocked. Cheek. However, there was still the aftermath. It burned through my flesh. Rapid magic power conversion. The magic power was opposite to my attribute, so it burned my body from the inside. Grr. However, I didn't stop. Light kept pouring out. Kantigonam urgently recalled the shadow. You, Kua, The recalled shadow gradually joined together to form one big sword. His ugly flesh was revealed, but he was started to use his real capabilities. The light attribute no longer worked on the shadow. I changed the magic power once again. This time, it was chaos. The patented attribute of Ariel Diablo. Her abyss sword used the power of chaos. It filled my entire body. Cheek. The smell of burning became even more intense. If this situation continued, then I would destroy myself, but I didn't mind at all. Right now, the important thing to me was eating. And I was definitely going to eat. Grr. I rushed towards his neck. Contigonam welcomed me with the shadow sword. A wave of magic power swept out from the intense clash. Kwang. Neither of us backed down. Explosive power built up from the clash of nails and sword. I am greedier. Contigonam gave an ugly laugh. His terrible appearance was hidden by the shadow, but he wanted a new body. He was pleased at the thought of winning and obtaining new flesh. He just needed to drag out the time. It seemed like I wouldn't be able to maintain this state for much longer. It felt like my health was dropping. My rationality was already completely gone, so Contigonam became more relaxed. Gerwang, Kwang, Kwang. His hands randomly moved during the confrontation. Every time that happened, blasts of chaos magic power and shadows would explode. Due to that, hundreds of the surrounding creatures died. The creatures in the circle watching the confrontation started to escape. It was even difficult for the advanced creatures to endure. The confrontation between the two even burned away at the dungeon. The magic power couldn't sustain the floor any longer and it started to collapse. Kwang, my dungeon master. Chrisley came out from a gap in some rocks, but it was too late. The space was completely divided in two. Give up and hand me your body. A long time had passed since the start of the confrontation with Contigonam. It was almost the end. My nails were broken, but I fought even more ferociously with my teeth. Contigonam wasn't safe either. His neck had been half torn off and pus was leaking. He needed to quickly change bodies or it would become dangerous. It was at that moment. Yihihi. The pretty and cute Yihi is back, master. Bibiyang. Yihi appeared with a loud sound. She wore a gold crown and carried a shield and shining sword that was like a toothpick. Yihi shook her head and looked around. Huh? Who are you? Yihi didn't notice that my appearance had changed as she looked at both of us. Who are you again? Where is Yihi's master? Didn't master come to this place? Strange. Yihi tapped a finger against her lips as she blinked. She soon seemed to realize something as she pointed towards Contigonam. I feel that you are rather strange. It makes sense that your face is ugly. Yihi is annoyed. As a fairy knight, Yihi can recognize a bad guy. So you are a bad person. Yihi raised her shield. Then a bright straight line stretched out from the jewels in the shield. Contigonam was dumbfounded. It was neck and neck. No, he was slowly grabbing the upper hand. My movements had been getting dull. He was certain of his victory after a few more hits. In the meantime, a fairy he had never seen before had intruded. He wanted to ignore her, but light started pouring out from the jeweled shield. And that feeling was correct. Cough. It wasn't a great blow, but it was enough to slow him down for a little bit. A small gap. The opponent flew through the gap and used his teeth. Kwajik, Kwajijik, Kuik. The subsequent scene was terrible. Contigonam's body was devastated by teeth. The winner didn't even enjoy the feeling and just settled down to feast. Eat, eat and eat again. That was his only action. Shake. Yihi lost her spirit at the odd sight. She had goose bumps all over her body. She turned away from Contigonam's body being devoured by a demon with gray wings. His eyes gazed at Yihi after he finished. Why Yihi isn't tasty. Yihi grasped her sword and shield, but there was an elusive feeling. She felt like she had seen the face before, despite it looking quite different. She checked the blessing, but there was no signs of a connection to master. What to do? Meanwhile, the gray wings flapped as he headed towards Yihi. Yihi closed her eyes tightly and cried out. Eat, wing. The crown shone. This was the first time Yihi was using it, but the ability of the crown was very unusual. She had a clear idea about the effect. Yihi was reminded of the moment she met the Pink Queen. The Mushroom Kingdom, the Cookie Kingdom, the gold crown and jeweled shield were treasures of the two kingdoms. She wore the treasures and went to meet the queen. She fought and lost. The Pink Queen laughed while Yi was crying with vexation. Oh, how fun. As it turned out, the Pink Queen was a fairy knight. She had been waiting 20,000 years for a successor to appear. Due to her boredom, she plotted this drama. She also apologized to the mushrooms and cookies. Yi wept with pouting lips. The really bad fairy knight opened her mouth and said, "That will be enough. You are called Yi? You have a very nice mentality. I will pass the succession rights to you. Although it has already happened. The crown, shield and sword. Those 3 items were tokens of a fairy knight. The sword can pierce through evil, the shield can reveal it, and the crown, it returns evil to its original place. In particular, the crown is dangerous and should only be used when needed. Use these 3 powers well. Then Yi can go back? Yes. Where do you want to go? Think of the place where you want to go. I will take you there. I want to go to Master's side. Huh? You are already serving someone? Awesome, awesome. I understand. Think about him closely. His features are required for something like this. Master has 2, no 3 big weapons and is unbelievably handsome. I was bad a little while ago. Yi. He still took care of Yi. Well, I understand. Now, are you ready to go to your master? Yes. Goodbye. Fairy Knight Nim. Kubuk. The power of the crown returned evil to its original place. Yi calculated that it wouldn't work on Master. Master was sometimes nasty, but Yi never considered him as evil. And the power of the crown sent the evil being away. He really wasn't Master. Yi neatly cleared the threat of the existence with gray wings. Only the remnants of the shadow remained. By the way, where is this place? Fairy Knight Nim sent Yi to a strange place. She looked around. There was a large pile of stacked rocks. It was at that moment Chrisley emerged from a small gap in the rocks. My dungeon master. Her fingernails were all broken and she had dried blood on her. It was from digging her way out of the rocks. Chrisley? Fairy Nim? Why are you here? Chrisley looked around anxiously instead of replying. Dungeon master, did you see him? He was just here. Yi shook her head. No, master isn't here. There were only 2 ugly things. That is impossible. Although his appearance had changed, he has gray wings. Yi's eyes widened at Chrisley's words. What's wrong? Yi did something bad. Then where? The crown returned evil to its original place. The place where Master was born and grew up in. The demon world? It is serious. Yi did something wrong again. Yi lamented with an upset face. Chapter 130 to 131. The Underground World. My body was heavy. My heart was so hot it felt like it was going to burst. Sweat flowed down my body and I could barely maintain consciousness. Alive. Oh, he is still alive? Is his heart really beating? Listen, can't you hear the sound? Something was moving around me. Cool skin made contact with me. Really, he is really alive. He is still living. Crazy. What do we do? Shouldn't we notify the village? No. Don't you know Elder Nim's personality? He has a safety-first policy. Only we should know for now. But his condition might get worse. He is severely burning up. Wait a minute. What good will that do? Remember what happened last time? Torium, do you remember? It will be okay if a cloth with cold water is put on his forehead. That's right. Indeed. It was so long ago that I had forgotten. Wait a moment. I will go and get it. Jeff, there is no time. He might be alive but he is weak. I know. Torium and Jeff. Among them, the one called Jeff departed. It is frustrating. However, I didn't have time to worry about such things. My chest felt tight. It felt like something was strongly pressing down on it. Perhaps, the origin of this pain was my heart. My heart was beating like crazy. It felt so horrible that I wanted it to stop. A living person. He showed up in the underground world of the dead. Kung, kung, kung. The sound of my heart beating echoed loudly in my ears. How much time had passed? My mind drifted to faraway places. I was trying to move my body when sounds were heard. Torium, should we take turns? We need to create a story. We can come up with a story here as well. It's not like the Lord will listen to my story anyway. He will probably only listen to pass the time. Perhaps. Torium, your stories are very interesting. I am envious that you have such a talent. Doesn't the Lord in the castle find you interesting? That would be nice, but he doesn't like looking at ugly things. He won't want to listen. In addition, a war is happening in the central area. Phew, aren't you also tired of it? This war should be finished. How many have already died? The commander won't let this end easily. I heard rumors that he suddenly showed up with a sword after disappearing for a while. Maybe he might be able to conquer Central this time. No, there is an eternal curse on that area. The legitimacy doesn't matter. Everything will remain the same. They are only concerned about their self-interests. Those with a lowly status like us are always suffering. But even so, the momentum is with the commander. There might end up being a conscription in our village. Aren't we to the very south of Central? Actually, there are rumors that the south will soon become a battlefield. Why? They are rallying forces. They think the south is easy prey and are intending to grab it. There is already talk that an active army is heading here. I'm already tired of war and it is coming to the south. There is no safe place. Will the matchless warrior move? Shut up. We can't talk about this here. By the way, don't you think he has been sleeping for a while? The fever is gone. He is resilient and has a strangely fast recovery. In this state, he will soon, finger. His fingers are moving. I saw it. Jeff, don't make a fuss. He is still moving. Is he trying to write something on the ground? Are they letters? Torium, do you know what he is doing? Ah, letters. It is really bad handwriting. Anyway, he is asking where this place is. This place is the underground world. The world of the dead. We are the undead. I am Torium. The noisy kid sitting next to me is Jeff. That's right. Who are you? Write it. Still got a bit of a look. Let's see, Randolph Briggseel. Ask him. How did he manage to come here alive? Did you hear? Please answer. We have been very curious about this. Not moving? I guess he is unconscious again. How weak. His wounds were very large. It is great that he is already healed enough to move. Jeff, bring me some gellum from my room. Isn't that precious? Hurry. Sheesh, don't yell at me. Wait a moment. My body was gradually stabilizing. Even the wildly beating heart gradually slowed down. My depleted magic power recovered and my color returned. Soon, I was able to open my eyes. They really are the undead. I was inside a cave. 4 eyes were watching me. They were missing their hair, had violet skin and fungus all over their bodies. The undead. I remembered asking a few questions with my fingers. I remembered that this was the underground world and the presence of the undead. The problem is, I'm not sure where the underground world is. The circulation of magic power was different. It was unfamiliar, but there was also familiar magic power hovering around me. At first, I felt a little bit panicked. This wasn't Earth, the demon world or even the spirit world. It was a place I wasn't familiar with. My physical condition is in the worst state. I frowned after checking the state of my body. It couldn't be worse than this. In this state, I wouldn't even be able to handle a lower grade creature. My muscles were almost dead and my magic power was still mostly depleted. I couldn't even afford to call a lightning god. What are you looking at? I used the wall as support to stand up and spoke. He is speaking. It really is amazing. Was Jeff his name? He seemed to be the one making a fuss. Anyway, they had saved me but I was still skeptical. I couldn't trust anyone in this post-battle situation. I had occasionally heard their voices while drifting in and out of consciousness. Where did you come from? You are Torium? Correct. Torium, I'd like to ask something first. Is this place really the underground world? Yes. It isn't the demon world or middle world. Technically speaking, it is a place that exists in the middle. I can't believe it. I walked out while still leaning on the wall. Torium came to my other side in order to help. Not long afterwards, I exited from the cave. I couldn't help snorting. The cave was at the bottom of a cliff and I was able to see a pretty wide area. It is worse than the demon world. A place full of death. No, it was a place for the dead. Everything was different. It was a similar feeling to when I arrived on Earth from the demon world or when I first entered the spirit world. What happened in the confrontation with Contigonam? I frowned. I remembered up to my confrontation with Contigonam. But afterwards, there was just a gap in my memory. I can't communicate with Yihi or check the status window. It seemed like the system was still broken. I clicked my tongue. I can't exist here. Of course. This is a world that only contains the dead. Torium said from next to me. Do you know how I can get back? I don't know. In fact, it is still unbelievable. From what I understand, this is the first time something like this has happened in the underground world. It is possible that others might know. Maybe, but shouldn't you become more stable first? You still don't look good. It made a lot of sense. It was important to understand the situation, but first my body needed to heal. I wouldn't be able to move around comfortably in this state. Even one orc will be troublesome right now. I was in the worst state. The reason why my body was like this. The skill corruption gave me wings and horns. My status, I made a fist. Bare bones and blue veins were visible. Do you want anything to eat and drink? Torium was an undead, so he didn't worry about my emotional state. Very presumptuous. I don't intend to get things for free. I will answer some of your questions. It seemed like Torium and Jeff had a lot of questions for me. Then I would use it to accomplish what I wanted. It might be hard for you to eat. It doesn't matter. I shook my head. I could eat anything. Jellum was a tree and the branches could be used to make a porridge. It was the only food they had, but it was still better than nothing. I'm a storyteller. Every week, I would make up a story to tell the Lord and I would receive a branch of Jellum in return. Jellum is very important in the underground world. It is good for increasing the shelf life of a rotting body. Torium spoke in a condescending tone. Indeed, I had never heard the name Jellum. It is like a preservative. Preservative? There is such a thing? It seems to be something in the other world. By the by, who are you? I know that your name is Randolph Briggseel, but how did you come to the underground world? I already received food and water. I needed to cooperate to continue obtaining them in the future. I also needed to find out about this place. I was operating a dungeon. Dungeon? A dungeon filled with creatures? That's correct. I heard that warlocks or lich normally operate a dungeon. That's it for today. Wait, it can't end here. I will tell you more tomorrow. I sat down and shut my eyes. First of all, it was necessary to examine the insides of my body. And I got an idea about how to recover my magic power. I understand. I will come back tomorrow. Come with something to eat and drink. The Jellum is precious. It doesn't matter to me. Torium abruptly left. He turned and exited the cave. He was quickly followed by Jeff. Is this really okay? Jeff, I am a storyteller. I can't stand wondering. Aren't you scared? Those eyes. I'm not an opponent for him. He seems to have killed a lot. What? Shit. Where did he fall from? What is a preservative? I really want to know. I am also curious. You will be able to make a better story. So please lend me some Jellum. I don't have enough. Are you crazy? It will be worth it. A person has shown up in this world. I think that it is very significant. Anyway, Torium, I've known you for a long time, but I still don't know you. Jeff sighed. I pulled the magic bag tied at my waist. Fortunately, the bag was still safe. I was recognized as its owner, so no one else could take anything out. Wrath and the Emperor's sword are inside. It was lucky that the items I needed were all contained in the bag. I checked all the items and stood up. I started stretching my arms. It only lasted for 30 seconds. My arms started trembling. It was difficult for me to even walk. My stamina was a mess. I will have to start from the basics again. It was like when I first stepped foot on the battlefield of the demon world. I tried everything I could to survive. I desperately created and mastered techniques. It seemed like I had to repeat that once again. First I will start with my body. It was urgent that I rebuild my muscles. I had already experienced this once. In addition, my body had a remarkable level of recovery that would allow it to reach its original state. It was something I personally experienced daily. Despite having trouble walking on the first day, my muscles had recovered a lot by the second day. It isn't a simple preservative. In particular, the effects of the Jellum branches were excellent. It rejuvenated my body and made it more resilient. My weakened magic power was also returning. It was only a matter of time before I could use a skill. Wrath, the Emperor's sword. Were they originally so heavy? I could feel the weight and had to hold one sword with both hands. It was like I had never held a sword before. I laughed as I recalled the first time I used a sword. This is the feeling. It happened when I was exactly 12 years old. I was forcibly mobilized for the war and received sword training. Approximately 30 demons of a similar age were gathered, but only 2 could survive to become proper soldiers. I tenaciously survived. I used every last bit of my strength to survive using the sword. At that time, I remembered looking into the instructor's eyes. I had confidence that I wouldn't lose to soldiers. Those eyes are filled with hate. After the victory in battle that day, I challenged the drunk instructor to a duel and killed him. Otherwise, I instinctively knew that I would be killed. I was committed to my survival. War was occurring everywhere in the demon world. Only those with true power could have freedom. That was the period when I grew the fastest. It also happened with a demon. The evil Brigzeal was a demon whose last name I took after killing him. Despite being sloppy, he was still one of the 72 demons. Following that, I put effort into becoming even stronger. My development slowed after meeting the Grand Dukes. But after receiving strength from Deathbringer's offer, was it really power, due to my efforts? Of course, I couldn't deny all my efforts when touring the battlefields in the demon world. I was a little bit fiercer, but I was still responsible for the constraints on myself. I tried after going back. At the very least, I did better than my previous life. However, I still couldn't erase the feeling of being insufficient. I became complacent due to the memories of my previous life. This had become clear now that I thought about it. I needed to rely on true abilities rather than stats. The battle against Grand Duke Okulos had been a result of that pride. If I had made a little more effort on my own, then the story might be different. It was one of numerous possibilities, but, in order to do that, I needed to cross a wall. I need to recreate my body, so I might as well raise my pure strength. I wanted to rise on my own, without relying on anyone else. I gripped Wrath and the Emperor's sword again. High-end Moon. It was impossible to perfectly imitate even when using corruption. It was 99% similar, but a critical 1% was still missing. I would make the sword technique entirely my own. I glanced up at the sky. The moon is floating here as well. Late in the evening, I wielded my swords under the moonlight. My movements didn't stop until I felt exhausted and was about to collapse. This continued for 6 days. I increasingly adapted to the weight of the swords. This is the impact of corruption or the influence of something else. I wielded my swords on top of a cliff and thought for a moment. I was curious about the reason why I came to the underground world. It clearly affected my body. The magic power flowing around due to the heart of the Hell Monarch still wasn't consistent. However, the muscles in my body had clearly degraded after I woke up. It must be due to using corruption or dealing with Contigonam. I couldn't use corruption again. It was too dangerous. I pushed those questions aside and focused on the recovery of my body. I turned my head and glanced at someone. Jeff, the undead Jeff. A short distance away, his sleek body was practicing with a sword. Asa, Urasha, he shouted out loud. He was learning quite well. Jeff had been repeating these actions since 2 days ago. After seeing me practice the sword in the talk of war, he would always come here. He cried out and would sometimes look over at me. He was asking, how are my skills? Certainly, his ability to handle a sword wasn't bad. It was clear in practice, but there was no knowing how he would fare in battle. Spar with me once. I walked over with my sword. My moderate stamina meant I could use the swords. There was one thing left. I needed to gradually get my body accustomed to fighting again. The corners of Jeff's mouth lifted. Is it okay? You have recovered quite a bit, but a sword fight? He had been watching me for a few days. High-end Moon's sword technique was complicated. From a third-party point of view, it was a hard sword dance. Moreover, I was going slowly through it step by step so misunderstandings couldn't arise. Jeff had noticed the deepness behind my sword technique. You can't do it? What, me? No. I have killed hundreds on the battlefield. Jeff who killed 100 warriors. That's me. He hit his chest. There was confidence in his skills. And he also felt pride. I said calmly, then let's make a bet. The winner will get whatever they want from the loser. How about it? The winner gets anything they desire? That's right. Jeff looked at my swords. Wrath and the Emperor's sword. They weren't plain-looking weapons. The magic power from them felt incredible. Anyone who inspected them would feel greedy. The swords looked great even when they were still. He started drooling once he saw them in action. There was a feeling of tension because the swords could kill. However, slowing down the movements was effective in showing the swords off. Now he was given a chance to obtain them. Jeff licked his lips. Those swords. Give me both of them. Randolph, do you still want to face me? Say that after you win. You should listen to me. Hoo-hoo. At the same time, Jeff widened the distance. He was holding a curved sword like a scimitar. He seemed completely confident. In my current state, I will be lightly pushed. I objectively analyzed. My body had adapted, but it was still slightly lacking. But my growth was lacking a driving force. Yes, winning a dull fight wasn't fun. Come, haha, won't you regret this? I shrugged and Jeff clicked his tongue. Victory. The one who struck first in a fight was more likely to win. I didn't do that. I was trying to save as much stamina as possible. Fortunately, Jeff entered in range first. Hurrah! Jeff's swordsmanship was excellent. He seemed familiar with fighting. It wasn't a lie that he had killed 100 people. But that was it. It was regrettable, but he was lacking in sophistication. He didn't know how to distribute his power properly against the opponent. I slowly wore Jeff down before ending with my sword at his neck. It was hard. It only took 10 minutes, but I was exhausted. In addition, there were wounds all over my body. It was because I only defended the important areas. No way. I was sure I would win. Jeff was astonished. He consistently had the advantage when attacking. It only appeared like that on the surface. I put down the sword and said briefly, "Jeff, you will fight me every day for the next 30 days." Jeff was a suitable opponent to check my physical condition. Over time, the fights became more heated. My physical condition improved, but Jeff became more desperate when fighting. "You monster-like fellow." Taying. On the 20th day, Jeff was lying on the ground with his sword in his hand. 20 days and 20 losses. Now he couldn't even last 1 minute against me. Just kill me. Stop teasing me. I can't do that. Strong. I will bite my tongue and kill myself. Jeff sat down and sighed. Jack JJAK. At that moment, Torium showed up. "You have really great skills. It seems like they are improving every day. What are you doing here today?" "Don't worry. Today is the last time I will come." Torium's face had darkened. At the same time, Jeff's head sunk down even more. "Did something happen? Commander Mokdali of the central area has decided to advance to the south. Jeff and we need to be prepared." "Prepared? Don't we have to protect our home? We have lived in the south for 50 years. We can't give it up now." Torium's eyes shone with determination. There was a strong will to protect. "Have you found a way for me to return?" Jeff and Torium had been searching for a way to return me, but now a war had started. Torium's expression changed at my question. "I have looked for every possible method. The one thing that I found. I want to hear it. In fact, I didn't want to say it. The truth about this world. I was too ashamed to say it, but now I can't do anything else." I folded my arms. It was a sit back and watch attitude. Torium opened his mouth. "This world is fake. A fake world made by the Hell Monarch." "Hell Monarch?" I involuntarily said. "Hell Monarch. A familiar name." Torium continued speaking with a solemn attitude. "He is a very scary person, also known as the Shadow Emperor. He is already dead, but we were tricked into coming to this place. In fact, Jeff and I have never seen him. At any rate, the commanders are meant to protect his treasures. Their role is to protect them until he returns to this world one day. However, they have become distorted over time." Torium sighed. "They started competing against each other for the legitimate rights to the treasure trove. But all the commanders agree that the treasure trove of the Hell Monarch should be opened. This is the only way to leave this place. It is self-explanatory that opening the treasure trove will cause a change in this world." Torium shook his head before continuing. "All the commanders agree, but they are killing each other for the sole right to open it. Some commanders have caused wars over it. It was the start of a long, long war that hasn't ended." "The cruel Commander Maxium." I interrupted Torium. Torium's eyes widened. "How do you know that name? Is he in this world?" "Why, yes. He was a neutral commander, but now he has declared war." The fog slowly lifted. This was related to my heart. And the cruel Commander Maxium was someone I bought from the achievements store. Now I knew what I had to do. I thought I had fallen into an unknown world, but there was a reason for it. Torium asked with a pale face. "I never said the name, so how do you know that?" "That name is synonymous with terror for us. He doesn't often participate in the war, so few have seen his true abilities. However, his name is like a taboo among us. Even Jeff would never say his name." His eyes looked at me carefully. I raised the Emperor's sword. This was Maxium's sword. He gave it to me. Its true identity was a weapon used by the Hell Monarch. Torium, this war, I will also be participating. I said it quietly. However, there was a heavy weight to my words. If this was the only way to return, I would have to make this world that stopped moving my own. Chapter 132 to 133, Blowing Wind. Torium was busy procuring materials to change my appearance. From now on, you require a little disguise. If you are noticed, then things will become complicated. All the prepared materials were like a makeup kit. Torium sat down with a branch and said, "Isn't this also a talent? I thought you only told stories. You can dress up clowns on the side." He had his own versatility. Jeff only knew how to use a sword, so the difference between them was like comparing heaven and earth. A disguise. It wasn't bad. I still hadn't regained my original power, so there was no need to complicate things. It was difficult to distinguish between friend and foe. I was outside the system and there was no guarantee that our relationship would be the same if I met Maxium again. Based on Torium and Jeff's reaction, just knowing Maxium was a risk. I couldn't even call out his name. I need some time to gauge the situation. I didn't know that much about this world. It was a fake world made by the Hell Monarch. That was all I knew. It was impossible to deduce from just listening to a few of Torium's stories. The smartest choice was to confirm things with my own eyes and develop a plan. Can you hide the sound of my heartbeat? The disguise couldn't hide sound. It would be strange if sounds only a living person would make came from me. Then Torium shook his head. Don't worry, I can solve this problem. You seem confident. Torium pulled out a small bottle from the pocket of his pants. The bottle was filled with red blood. This is the blood of a thunderbird. Applying the blood will conceal the sound. It is like a soundproof wall. Soundproof wall. There is such a thing. I knew about it. It was something that humans commonly used. Tell me later what a soundproof wall is. It is something I can't overlook as a storyteller. At any rate, sprinkling some of this blood will hide sound coming from your body. What about breathing? That isn't a problem. We sometimes breathe. It is a habit from when we were still alive. Torium stared at my face before opening up his disguise tools. Then let's get started. He held a brush and started painting my body. It is separate from swordsmanship. It felt like I was watching a sophisticated sword technique. The work took quite a long time. It was approximately an hour. It was over when Torium reached my forehead. It is done. It will be hard to tell unless someone has really keen eyes. However, it will be a hassle to maintain and you need to refresh it once a week. I peeked in the mirror. I stayed still and tracked my image in the mirror. I looked like a violet undead and gave off a strong impression. Is this the end? Jeff still has something left to do. He should be coming around now. He cleaned his tools and waited for someone. Jeff. He came running up with something in his hand. Darn mercenary scum. It isn't a big deal if I borrow it, but they wanted 5 gellum branches? Crooks. Jeff spat out with disgust as he got closer. The frown on his face showed that he wasn't in a good mood. What is it? I asked as Jeff stuck out the cloth in his hand. Here ya go. This is a precious seal, so don't lose it. The mercenary seal. Torium's words were an insufficient explanation. I still accepted the token and studied it. It seemed to be carved out of stone. A pattern of nails was embossed in the center. The reason why they gave this to me was simple. That is the sign of a mercenary. This world, it has been stopped for a long time. The Lord knows the faces and names of everyone in the village. The only outsiders in the underground world are mercenaries. I like it. I grasped the token. It was a job that wasn't bound to a place, so I was pretty interested. I had a similar role in the demon world. Why should I refuse? Torium sighed with relief and said, attach the seal to your left chest. The back of the seal seemed to have some type of sticky paste on it. I glanced at Torium after placing it on my left chest. It is quite enthusiastic. What is your attitudes toward me? Jeff and Torium, they showed no hostility towards me from the beginning. I was suspicious when I showed wrath and the Emperor's sword, but they didn't reveal their greed. I had given them nothing in the last 20 days. All I did was talk and spar. Even so, they were coming up with ways to defend me. It was hard to think that it was just a simple favor. Gulp. Torium swallowed his saliva before managing to speak. I just think that I will be able to tell the best story. This is your curiosity as a storyteller? I want to see the real thing, not a fake. My stories have all been mere fiction. How can I miss looking at a narrative about this fake world with my own eyes? So it is your treasure. There is no other way. And, I have already been on a long journey. He looked exhausted. He had been sensitive of time since this world was first created by the Hell Monarch. He could only guess how long had passed. Aren't you afraid of dying on this trip? It was a simple question. If he helped me and died, it would be because of his curiosity. Torium just laughed. I am already dead. Apart from my curiosity, I also want to rest. Including me, all the undead, we are just walking corpses. Even so, we can't get any rest until we feel the wind. In this world, those who have their desires fulfilled will feel the wind. The wind? Their dreams, hopes or something like that. Torium had to keep walking. One day, I had suddenly fallen here. He was filled with hope after seeing someone alive. I felt the heat from his dead eyes. Therefore, I slowly opened my mouth. Then I will hope for your death while traveling. Haven't I already died? Well, I will keep wondering about strange things. After hearing the story, I put away wrath and the Emperor's sword and turned. Let's go. Do you know where to go? Guide me. The broad wilderness. Only earth and dust was visible. A large village was built on it. Approximately 200 stone houses were gathered. It is quiet, I said while looking at the quiet scenery. The village was almost deserted. Nobody was wandering the streets. By now, they should all be gathered at the Lord's castle. Preparing for war? Correct. There are no children, so what reason is there to remain in the village? I nodded. Like Torium said, they were all undead. They had been in this state for a long time and couldn't have any children. The differences in roles between men and women had disappeared. Then Torium said carefully, I was wondering, can you change your tone? Why are you asking? Lord Nim and the generals won't appreciate it from a normal undead. I won't change my tone for anyone. I kept this tone even in front of Deathbringer. Nobody could force me to change it. My resolve was firm. Torium also discovered that, stay as quiet as possible. Jeff and I will speak. Jeff nodded from next to him. The Lord here seemed quite demanding. The Lord's castle. It wasn't comparable to my dungeon, but it was still quite large. The guards opened the gate after checking Jeff and Torium's faces. Shortly after entering the castle, murmuring sounds could be heard. Damn it, did you forget the nickname of Commander Mokdali? Obstinate Mokdali. He is just obstinate, a vicious bastard who will do everything to get what he wants. He is a commander who commands 100,000 troops. Then should we run away? Haven't we spent 50 years on this land? Damn it, it is highly likely that they are coming to invade our land. The Dullahan Somalim. He is different from normal zombies. Hasn't Lord Nim been promoted to a ghoul? There are also a large number of skeleton soldiers. In the heart of the castle, thousands of undead were gathered in a wide area. The Lord was sitting in a huge chair and watching over the meeting. The Lord was a ghoul. He had gone one step further as a zombie. 2 skeleton soldiers were situated next to him. Torium explained, this is how our meetings normally work. 20 of the most influential people in the village will put something together and report it to the Lord. Usually it takes half a day. Jeff, you bastard, why did you come so late? The heated discussion at the table was broken up as we approached. The one to speak was a thick zombie. Jeff scratched his head. Wait, first of all, I want to introduce someone. Another zombie saw the seal on my left chest and said, Introduce? Ah, the one next to you? It is definitely the first time I've seen him. A mercenary? He has considerable skills. You will have a big shock once you see it. A mercenary? I don't have much faith. Isn't it likely that he will run away when the war heats up? He will probably enjoy this village until then. Just look at him. I brought a real mercenary. Jeff, do you guarantee that? Yes, I guarantee it. The matchless warrior Jeff guarantees it. I was once duped by Jeff's assurances. This time it is true. He might seem frivolous, but Jeff was recognized by the village. Aish, just watch from the sidelines. Understood? Don't act needlessly overbearing. Just stay in the back. Jeff pulled my hand and moved. A large map was laid on top of the table that had the positions of the enemy marked. Jeff led me over to another young man who was talking. The opponent is the Dullahan Somalim. He has approximately 1,000 troops. The general configuration is 900 zombies, 90 skeleton soldiers and 10 skeleton priests. The captain of the enemies is the Dullahan Somulam. They will arrive in approximately 3 days. We have 500 troops and most of them are zombies. Any good opinions? Let's see. Isn't holding up the only answer? We don't need to eat or drink. Just endure it. Don't you know what an ignorant bastard Somulam is? He will just break through the thin walls. Dig a trap. The combined opinions weren't useful. But I ignored their words and just stared at the map. It was an entire map of the underground world, but I could see a path. The rating of the creature is similar to my current power. Dullahan, an advanced 1 LV creature. A difficult but not impossible opponent. The status window wasn't working, but a Dullahan seemed like a decent opponent. The level of the soldiers wouldn't be that difficult. Shawaruruk. I pulled out Wrath, Pook, and I pointed it at the map. What? At that moment, it became quiet. All the undead around the table and even the Lord was watching me. I held Wrath tightly, and, quack, a large part of the map and table. I pointed to the ripped portion and said, right here, I will break through, take care of the rest. The silence didn't last long. The undead around me started complaining. What is that guy doing? Attack? A suicide operation? Who brought him? The reaction wasn't good. This was the first time I attended a village meeting, yet I presented such a ridiculous opinion. There was no way it would be good. Jeff's expression was completely frozen. Torium slapped his forehead and prepared to defend me. Stop. At that moment, the Lord stood up. He was twice as tall as a normal zombie. A ghoul. It has been a long time since I've seen an undead so filled with passion. Preemptive strike. Are your skills that great? Your appearance, aren't you still a normal zombie? A lazy face. He came down from his chair and slowly approached me. I was in disguise. Despite giving a wild impression, the basis was still a zombie. The ordinary changes are largely irrelevant. My exterior might have changed, but my insides couldn't. In the end, my nature was just strengthened. The outward change was very big. I was changed to look like a zombie, but the ghoul was only a few centimeters larger than me. It was something that couldn't be changed. There were no obvious signs of power. For example, the wings and horns I obtained after using corruption were signs of real transformations. The slight increase in size couldn't even be compared. That means you could even beat me. If you truly want to keep this place, then follow me. I will defend it. I raised Wrath and said. The skeleton soldiers saw my actions and surrounded me. Ha ha ha, I have to recognize your ambition. Then, shall we see the skills you are so smug about? If you don't, then the skeleton soldiers will tear off your limbs. A mercenary I've seen for the first time. There were 7 skeleton soldiers. It wasn't a big deal. They were merely low-grade creatures, and I had restored my strength to an intermediate level. I looked around quietly. It would be hard to wipe out the incoming enemies alone. I needed the help of those who were here. Even if they didn't want to help, the situation meant it was necessary. In order to do that, I needed to appeal myself to them. It was necessary to do this. How funny. In the last 20 days, I had become more familiar with High Moon's sword technique. My stats and magic power weren't as strong, but it was actually much easier now. The power of moonlight falling depended on the technique itself, so the power couldn't be ignored. However, it would be a waste to use High Moon's sword techniques on these creatures. I raised Wrath, and, Quajik, I made a fist, Quadaduk. The skeleton soldiers couldn't catch up to my speed. My fist slammed into their faces. The skeleton soldiers fell down one by one. I cleaned up 7 of them in only 20 seconds. I shook off the fragments of bones left in my fist and looked at Torium. I have a question. Is the Lord selected through any special method? Originally, the southern commander would be the Lord. But in this remote territory, the strongest person becomes the Lord. Torium's face showed his surprise. The skills I showed during the spars with Jeff were just the tip of the iceberg. My body's condition was to blame for not everything being revealed. Of course, Jeff had enough strength to also deal with 7 skeleton soldiers. But it was impossible for him to pull it off with his bare hands in 20 seconds. I did it, therefore, they judged that I could compete against a Dullahan. Now they would move on their own. The Lord is the strongest. I like it. Of course, he has been ruling this territory for 50 years. In order to become our Lord, you need to show that type of strength. Torium said. In other words, I couldn't hold back. I quite liked it. There was a thin smile on my face. I needed to become the Lord if I wanted them to follow me. An incompetent person isn't eligible. Can you deal with the Lord and 20 of the best talents in the village? Fight without killing. Then we will gladly follow you. Torium noticed my thoughts and made that suggestion. The undead would use this time to judge me. Torium wanted to see an epic tale that would make the wind blow. It will surely be difficult. Don't flatter yourself just because you beat 7 skeleton soldiers. The confused lord took out a huge sword. 20 of the most talented and influential undead gathered. Jeff was included among them, and unlike the others, he was smiling. His expression had changed since I came forward. I will take revenge for the 20 losses. Indeed, there was a reason. The center of the area quickly became empty. I looked at the opponents standing in a line. 21 vs 1. They were also stronger than the skeleton soldiers. However, they weren't my opponents. It will be difficult to not kill them. I pulled out Wrath without any hesitation. The challenge was to win without killing. Naturally, I would win, but I didn't know how good my control over my strength was. Dullahan. It was 3 meters in height and one of the top undead. I don't know Mokdali Nim's intentions in making me obtain a small territory like this. Somulam was a Dullahan who led 1,000 troops. He was someone who grumbled a lot when he didn't like anything. Commander Mokdali decided to push the south with simple power. However, he only used repeated raids to minimize his losses. Mokdali traveled around the south hitting it. The problem was that not all of the south was the same. Somulam sighed as he approached the target location. It is on the very edge of the frontier. Everything looked like a wasteland. That scene didn't change ever after a few days. Now it would only be half a day until he arrived. Commander Mokdali had ordered him to obtain this territory in the south. Somulam had no right to refuse. Will we give an offer for surrender? A skeleton asked. Somulam placed a hand on his face and said confidently, Offer? There is no need. I will sweep all my resentment away. Wipe out the enemy. He seemed to be releasing some of his feelings. Somulam was placing his huge sword on his shoulders when he saw something. Captain Somulam Nim, something is approaching. I saw. Someone was quickly coming this way. He was fearlessly rushing alone towards 1,000 soldiers. Is he crazy? Somulam muttered to himself. The opponent didn't stop and came closer. The skeleton soldiers took out their bows. Arrows coated with powerful poison were fired simultaneously from the bows. But the person didn't stop. Rather, he was getting faster. They are crazy. Somulam laughed. One thing was for certain, he would never make it here safe. Quakwang. At that moment, there was a loud sound and the soldiers were swept away. A line was created. I pierced through on my own. Faster. It was a refreshing feeling. I was using pure swordsmanship to overwhelm the enemies. There weren't any skills or reliance on my stats. I only used my physical abilities and swordsmanship. I wanted to push myself beyond my current limits. My muscles screamed as I accelerated. Stronger. Quack. All my strength was placed into my sword. I wouldn't be able to fight for a long time, but I didn't care. Pushing myself more was training. It was a risky fight where the result was unknown. Risking one's life was the driving force to becoming stronger. I had only realized it again after being weakened. The Dullahan Somulam. He moved his heavy body while holding a greatsword. This guy. Don't even think about leaving here alive. I had slaughtered 200 enemies alone. The situation was reaching the turning point. But Somulam was now moving. This wasn't a big deal. Rather, it came at the appropriate time. My power had been used for a while and he was the strongest enemy. I would be able to feel a sense of growth if I won. Become much stronger. Keng. The sword and greatsword clashed. At that moment, kill, help Lord Nim. My army arrived through the hole that I had pierced. Somulam was 1 level stronger than a regular Dullahan. He was around an advanced 2 LV creature. But this much was expected. Quang. In the confrontation of pure strength, I was somewhat pushed back. I was pushed to the ground and quickly rolled. Arrows from nearby skeleton soldiers pierced my thigh and chest. This is familiar. The wounds and pain were nothing. Such things couldn't stop me. I pulled out the arrows stuck in my thigh and chest. It was a little uncomfortable, but I was still in the middle of the fight. For Mokdali Nim, Somulam cried out as he raised his sword. Calling out the name of Commander Mokdali just reaffirmed his loyalty. I recalled a scene with Maxium. He had a similar attitude as he said, "Your Majesty." He thought I was the Emperor due to having his heart. That heart wouldn't stop so easily. It was similar to my nature. So there was no sense of difference. In moments of crisis, the heart also became stronger. Get rid of them. Victory was confirmed, but Somulam's expression was still rotten. He showed signs of fright as he looked down at me. And he started showing more signs of distress. Over time, it changed to a downright horrified expression. "You, Hook." I took a deep breath and raised wrath. Then I cut off Somulam's head with it. In order to kill a Dullahan, the heart and head had to be destroyed. Now I need to remove the torso. "I will kill you." Quack. Somulam's head had been accurately cut in two. After that, I assaulted the body with a smile on my face. Wah! Victory! We won! Hooray Lord Nim! Hooray Randolph Briggseel Nim! There were 400 people who followed me. Of those, approximately 200 had survived. On the other hand, they only wiped out a few enemies. Victory! He really pierced through alone. Did you see the fight with Somulam? I got goosebumps. I put away wrath while Torium came up and greeted me. Congratulations on your victory. Your tone has changed. Lord Nim should say something to the General Undead. I remembered. I had spoken to Torium in the village. Now I am the real Lord? Open a path to the center of the enemy alone. We won't run away. We will fight. That is, we have accepted Randolph Nim as our Lord. 400 people had been gathered here. 100 people were waiting at the castle. They were ready to flee in case the situation went bad. I had allowed it. After all, the point of this attack was to display my skills while breaking through the enemy. If I couldn't pierce through, then they would be eliminated. Send a messenger to the southern commander. Inform him that the Lord has been replaced. Anyway, I know very well that Lord Nim has work separate from looking after our village. 100 people are still following the old Lord. The 100 people remaining in the castle. They were followers of the ghoul. They hadn't approved of my plan. Torium gave a bitter laugh. The tide has turned and they can't stop it. Rather, today is a festival. Everybody is excited. All of the remaining undead were looking at me. The expression in their eyes wasn't bad. Ah, we have fended off Mokdali's first attack on our territory. Once the southern commander learns of this face, he might contact Lord Nim separately. Understood, I roughly replied. I was exhausted. Rest was my top priority. I moved back towards the village. Torium remained behind me and said, "The wind has started to blow. The wind that will bring rest to everyone." Chapter 134 to 136. 7 Sins, Twilight Blacksmith Oswin. 100 people were waiting at the castle. Most of them had heard about my victory. The former lord had listened with a stiff expression. He knew that there was no way out. The scent of victory was already coming from me. If he tried anything hostile, then it was highly likely that he would lose. That evening, there was a large party. An undead party was quite different. They ate jellum, danced or sparred. It was more fun than the party on Earth. I took a break for a few moments and thought about my swordsmanship. In a spacious room set aside for the Lord, I visualized and recalled the details of the battle. It is developing little by little. I was recovering my original strength. And invisible things were starting to show themselves. Hyen Moon's sword technique, I can complete it. Ironically, Hyen Moon's sword technique was harder for good swordsmen to learn. If it was just imitated, then the essence of the sword technique wouldn't be learnt. Even with corruption, there was still 1% missing. I slowly realized the parts 1 was missing. Mabe Ariel Diablo had also tried variations of it. She couldn't understand it, so her stances were weak. She wasn't able to complete it her way. But I thought differently. I intended to eat everything. The sword was his life. Understanding. Yes, that was necessary. There were few people that were that strong from the beginning. It was also true for Hyen Moon. He only polished one sword technique for his entire life. I trained every night that there was moonlight. Suik. I brandished my sword. When the moon wasn't visible, I engraved Hyen Moon's movements into my mind. An enduring swordsman. No one could go against his sword. But that became harder as he got older. He wanted to become stronger. I knew a little bit about his life. A war slave who climbed up from the bottom. He survived by using the bodies of his allies as shields and desperately tried to learn the enemy's techniques. I didn't resemble him. He learned his sword techniques from the battlefield like me, but I had chosen to settle. Heeing. Wind blew into the room. Wind came flowing out from the sword. The moonlight around the sword weakened. Using the skill was smoother and more beautiful in the moonlight. A clearing on the grounds of the castle. Torium and dozens of skeleton soldiers were gathered in this place. What is this about? The skin of the zombies is rotting quickly and the skeleton soldiers have stopped functioning. The bones are damaged but not unusable. We have managed to salvage 59 bones. Right, I gave a small nod. This was something I just learnt. Of course, it wasn't a typical case. This was the underground world. In other places, zombies and skeleton soldiers couldn't die. Torium spoke with a bittersweet expression. Didn't I talk about resting? They have failed to find their rest. Their souls will forever remain in the bones, suffering in this world. You can distinguish between those who have found rest and those who haven't. I was filled with curiosity. Torium slowly shook his head. We don't know. However, there are some cases when their bodies will disappear without leaving a trace. We just think that they have truly found rest. There was no way to be sure. Maybe it was just a futile hope. Even so, it was something that allowed them to endure for a long time. Oh, and, Torium paused before pulling out a letter. A messenger arrived early this morning. He delivered a stamped letter from the Southern Commander. You have only been the Lord for 4 days, so it is meaningful that he sent it so quickly. It finally came. I took the letter and said, "You told me the news a little bit late. I immediately went to find you but you were concentrating on the sword, I'm sorry." It had been a few days. I had only focused on wielding the sword. It was in order to gain enlightenment in High Moon's sword technique. But my senses didn't notice someone watching me for a long time. I was too absorbed. I opened the letter to see small words. My eyes were caught by the contents. Randolph Brigzeal. That is the name of the new lord of the Pabram territory. I know very well about your victory against the Dullahan Somulam. Somulam is within the top 20 of Mokdali's subordinates. Indeed, it is a truly great thing. I formally invite you to the main fortress in the south. Southern hero. A hero who can stop Mokdali's ambitions. My heart is burning and I am looking forward to seeing you at the main fortress. It was filled with flowery words but basically, he was curious and wanted to see my face. However, there was one point I couldn't understand. Torium, what is the name of the Southern Commander? The letter only mentioned, main fortress. Torium had only called him, the Southern Commander. Torium's eyes widened like he just realized. Ah, I haven't mentioned. Oswin. Oswin? I hesitated for a moment. I had heard that name before. Wasn't that the same name as the Twilight Blacksmith, Oswin who made the 7 sins? Torium saw my reaction and asked, "Do you know it?" "No, it is nothing. By the way, the Southern Commander wants to see me." "Ah, very good. The Commander will have many questions about your victory. It is because we've lost many battles to Mokdali. Then I have to depart." "Right now? Before that? Are you going to see him looking like that? Is there a problem?" It wasn't strange. Wrath, Sloth and Infinity Armor had returned to their original appearances. It was an assortment of equipment. But Torium's thoughts seemed different. The first impression is the most important. You have drawn a considerable amount of attention and the Commander has invited you directly. Lord Nim is a hero. Your style needs to have that type of elegance. Can you leave this to me? Torium said confidently. It wasn't bad to be prepared. I will try it once. I would check the work and wear it if it was okay. 50 skeleton soldiers, Torium and Jeff. I was in the lead. The road to the southern fortress wasn't very complex. We were able to arrive at the fortress after 3 days and nights. The fortress was huge. It was at the level of a city. There were many traces indicating that it had been created a long time ago. Several ghouls blocked us from entering the gates. Torium came forward and said, "This is the new lord of Pabram. Southern Commander Nim has sent a letter, so let us in." After confirming the letter, the ghouls bowed deeply. Rattle. The huge gates opened and a different world stretched out before me. There were beautiful buildings with 2 or 3 floors where people seemed to live. Jellum trees were also lined up cleanly to create a beautiful view. Isn't Jellum hard to obtain? In a manner of speaking. This is a place where only undead are allowed. That's why there are so many Jellum trees. Instead, take a look around. Isn't everyone staring at Lord Nim? Torium said with a smile. Just like he said, all the undead were staring at me. Torium was versatile and even had talent as a blacksmith. He created a few good accessories made of bones and layered them on top of infinity armor. It was something that showed off the grandeur of the skeleton soldiers. Quite a few undead looked like they thought it was handsome. Oh, I don't know how to move in this. I am just wearing armor, but Jeff was also wearing armor like a knight. He appeared awkward and slightly uncomfortable when moving. Torium stared towards the heart of the fortress and said, "Now, let's move on. Today's hero is Lord Nim." The heart of the fortress was a great castle. I could barely see the top and it was easy to think the castle belonged to a duke in the demon world. I can appreciate it. The castle looked like it was made in the olden times. It couldn't be called a small and insignificant castle. In addition, there were quite a few high-level undead. The castle entrance was guarded by 2 dark warriors. After entering, there would probably be Lich and Death Knights. The power gathered here was formidable. I received information as I was escorted to the place where the Southern Commander was. I have never directly seen the Southern Commander. However, I heard rumors that he is someone who doesn't like dispensing with formalities. Be careful with your speech and actions. Torium gave advice from his position next to me. I was only listening with one ear. Oswin, it might just be a similar name. So it was better not to expect too much. After climbing a spiral staircase, I reached the top floor of the castle. There was only one room that seemed to contain the Southern Commander. The total attacks? I'm tired of worrying and suffering. Mokdali should have some limits. There were loud noises as I climbed to the top floor. The Dark Warrior knocked on the door of the room and cried out. "Commander Nim, the new Lord of Pabram has come. Enter." A magnificent voice. I immediately entered the room as the Dark Warrior opened the door. 12 undead were sitting at a round table. As expected, Lich and Death Knights could be seen. It seemed like the strongest people in the south were gathered. But the most eye-catching person was the one sitting in the middle. Doom Knight. It was the evolved form of a Death Knight and a high-class 2LV creature. He had 6 hands. Bones protruded from the Doom Knight like wings. He was the Southern Commander Oswin. "Are you the Lord of Pabram? You look great." Oswin turned his head towards me and said. It was evident that he was surprised by my appearance. Torium's plan had somehow succeeded. However, I was keeping a close eye on the gloves he wore on his hands. My skills weren't working, but I had been using Mind's Eye for a while. At the very least, I could identify what it was. 7 sins. I figured that the gloves Oswin was wearing were one of the 7 sins. Was he really the Twilight Blacksmith Oswin? According to the description of the items, he was crazy. In the end, he had thrown away the 7 sins. There was no way to know why he was in the underground world. So, I needed to confirm it. Keng. I pulled out a sword. Wrath. It was one of the 7 sins, so I wanted to see Oswin's reaction. However, the response I desired wasn't there. "What are you doing?" He just frowned. It couldn't just be a coincidence that his gloves were part of the 7 sins and he had the same name. I needed a clearer confirmation, so I said, "Oswin, Commander of the South, I, Randolph Brigzeal, challenge you to a spar." There was another thing. As soon as Maxium saw me, he had sensed the heart of the Hell Monarch. However, Oswin showed no signs of knowing. It seemed to be buried by the blood of the Thunderbird. There was a difference, even if they were both commanders. He would naturally succumb if I pulled out the Emperor's sword, but the situation was still uncertain. In fact, a Doom Knight was a high-class 2LV creature, so he wasn't an easy opponent even in my normal state. If he was seeking my life, then he wouldn't be easy to deal with. So I would let the situation ebb and flow. Many have come to this room, but it is the first time someone has challenged me to a spar in this main building. This was important. I slowly opened my mouth. I was originally a rogue mercenary. I've heard stories of the Southern Commander here and there. It was enough to make my blood run hot. The Dullahan Somulam is just a small fry to you. How did he become one of Mokdali's top 20 subordinates? On the other hand, every single person gathered here looks great. If those men follow you, then it is enough to deserve my sword. These types of sugar-coated words weren't like me. But I only wanted to achieve my goal. Oswin's expression changed. His frown was released and he shook his head. Just ruling properly has allowed the strong to gather. You have seen it properly. I thought you were a simple, rude person, but that isn't the case. In addition, I was able to guess Oswin's nature. He was quite arrogant. He was confident about himself. He wasn't unwilling to flatter himself. Rather, it was his favorite thing. I knew a few people like this. I also knew how to treat them. I didn't hear an answer. Will you receive my sword? So, I changed directions. The spar had the dual meaning of accepting my sword. It was like listening to a knight dedicate themselves to a king. I had disparaged Mokdali by defeating the Dullahan Somulam. Mokdali could be directly contrasted against Oswin. It was a direct comparison, but Oswin didn't want to hear the words, "You are not qualified." An exhibition situation. It would show his merits to everyone, so Oswin gave a satisfied smile. The new Lord of Pabram, Randolph Brigzeal. I will accept your sword. I have thought of a way to boost the morale of the South. Therefore, I will receive your sword in a friendly format. Oswin said my name for the first time. My plan had somehow worked. The first step, I would use the friendly spar to determine if he was Oswin. I shook his hand while the frozen Torium and Jeff recovered. What is Lord Nim's identity? I almost lost 7 lives. Torium said after entering the deluxe room we were assigned. Mokdali wasn't just running and fighting. He had slowly carved away at the South's power. There hadn't been a single victory in a fortnight, so the morale of the South was the worst. Then I won. I reversed the situation against the Dullahan Somulam. I even beat Somulam in a one-on-one battle. A hero who reversed the situation. The light of salvation. It was an event that boosted morale. So there was a lot of goodwill towards the spar. All of the undead at the fortress gathered to watch the spar. It was estimated that there were 200,000. It is significant. It wasn't just the fortress, but undead scattered through the South gathered. The spar was taking place in a building that looked like the Colosseum. There was such a long procession outside that many failed to get in. Oswin stood in the center of the arena, raised his 6 swords and shouted. We all know what happened at Pabrium. He might look like a zombie, but he is a true warrior who fought and won against the Dullahan Somulam. He defeated 1,000 troops with only 400 soldiers. Wah! Randolph! 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 So many people cheered my name that my ears hurt. By the way, only 10 days had passed since my battle with Somulam. However, everyone knew about it. It was announced intentionally. Oswin had clearly spread it after hearing the news. My name had started to gain prominence before the letter even reached me. This told me how urgent the situation in the South was. This remarkable warrior wasn't just satisfied with Somulam after showing up here. We have determined that he is a worthy warrior. Oswin raised his 6 hands higher. Even though this is just an exhibition, nothing can stop the hot heart of a warrior. Enjoy the festival. Today, let's all toast. Wah! Kegs were procured. They weren't affected by the alcohol, but the atmosphere was still heated. Everyone was looking forward to the spar. Talk. He put his hands down and it immediately became silent. The signal announcing the start of the spar was given. But, I had something to check before starting. Southern Commander Oswin. Before that, I would like to ask you something. What do you think is the true virtue of a king? The virtue of a king? Oswin didn't immediately answer the question. However, my commitment was firm. I want you to answer me. It was an unexpected question. He was a commander. The emperor called the Hell Monarch was already gone. He was an existence that everyone in the underground world knew of. But the Hell Monarch never showed up again. That's why Oswin started to walk his own path. He had the title of commander, but the shadow of the emperor was too large. Anyway, the commander who obtained the treasure would eventually wish to be reborn as the emperor. He should have thought about it at least once. I poked that point. Oswin hesitated for a while before saying, the true virtue of a king is sloth. Sloth. The answer I wanted had appeared. Sloth was a word that was written in Oswin's description of one of the 7 sins. The Southern Commander Oswin had said exactly the same words. The virtue of a king is sloth. It is the same name as one of the 7 sins. It can't be a coincidence. I was sure of it. In front of my eyes was the Twilight Blacksmith Oswin. I didn't know why Oswin didn't remember or why he was a Doom Knight, but I was certain of it. Dubalong said that the Dark Spirit King didn't have all of the 7 sins. Now I had the method to find the remaining items close at hand. I couldn't let him get away. It was thrilling. It felt like a puzzle had snapped into place. Thank you for the answer. I pulled out wrath. Now winning or losing didn't matter. Of course, I would compete to the best of my abilities. It was a chance to obtain some clues about Hyen Moon's sword technique. He was a perfect opponent. I had confirmed that Oswin was the Twilight blacksmith. After the spar and having my sword accepted, I swore a loyal vow. I was willing. Along with the title of Lord, I was granted the position of a captain. I was authorized to lead 2,000 soldiers. You didn't ask why I said such an unconventional thing. What does Southern Commander Nim want from me? I want to make you the hero of the South. I was currently at a training hall inside the castle. I didn't rest for even 1 second. I needed to use every second to swing my sword. Torium had watched from the sidelines as I trained in Hyen Moon's sword technique. I heard about it, and I am concerned. If you kick a rolling stone, then the backlash might be even worse. It is needed to build achievements. Will you also try to catch Commander Mokdali? That isn't bad. Quack. Wrath quickly moved through the air. I thought back to my fight with Oswin the other day. Doom Knight, a creature I had met in the demon world. Even a Grand Duke couldn't easily deal with one. The swordsmanship that unfolded using 6 hands was dazzling. There is something in the glove. Even in the midst of the spar, I didn't neglect examining Oswin. The gloves worn by Oswin. The magic power I felt from them made it highly likely it was one of the 7 sins. The magic power flowing from them was similar to when I was corrupted. Moderation was impossible. As carefully as possible, find out about the gloves that Commander Oswin is wearing. Is it a command? It is a command. Then I will follow you. Torium bowed and left the training hall. Swick, Swyik. Meanwhile, I was constantly on the move. 2 days later, Torium came to me while I was meditating. He never takes off the gloves. He values the gloves more than his weapons and even hates to have water touch them. Those gloves were cherished. It wasn't simply because they were one of the 7 sins. The weapons he used were also very good. There had to be a hidden reason why he didn't want water to touch them. I need to figure out the reason why. I needed to do it myself. I stood up. Good job. No, I just followed your command. I laughed. A fire similar to Krasla's had risen inside Torium. It was an attitude that indicated they would do everything to complete off my commands. I need to resolve this quickly and go back. At the same time, I was curious about the situation of the dungeons. I didn't know what would happen while I was stuck here. Okulos had died, but the sensation he created was still there. The balance of power would be disrupted in the aftermath. It was highly likely that the other Grand Dukes would move. I've heard rumors about Mokdali. He has begun a full-scale offensive. Lord Nim should be contacted soon. Tomorrow. Tomorrow I will participate. That is abrupt. I was just informed. I am going to see the soldiers. 20 minutes before Torium arrived, a dark warrior had entered the training hall and announced it. It was quite abrupt. I needed to be prepared to move in just 1 day. I turned and exited the training hall. If I am going anyway, I should prepare as much as possible. There were things only available here. I couldn't ignore them. My growth rate here was remarkable. I was changing every day. Simply pushing myself wasn't responsible for the abnormal growth. This world itself seemed to be helping my growth. As long as I was stepping on this ground. Once I returned to Earth, I would notice the difference as I engaged in a competition with the other Grand Dukes. 2,000 soldiers. The majority of them were skeleton soldiers, so the configuration was simple. They had low intelligence, meaning complicated commands couldn't be given. But it was still good. At least they could steadily follow my orders. Approximately 30,000 soldiers left the fortress. It was a considerable number that was prepared overnight. Oswin shouted from the front. This is a sudden move because we have received intelligence that Mokdali's 4th subordinate, Gudeos, is moving to dry land. Catching him will be like cutting one limb off Mokdali. Southern heroes, save the South and sweep out the invaders. Protect it, protect it. The shouts rang out. The remaining people in the fortress waved as we left. If it went as planned, there would be a landslide victory. At the same time, Oswin raised his 6 swords up high. To war. The suffering South had finally drawn their swords. Thanks to the intelligence obtained in great mobility, they successfully punished Gudeos. Gudeos only had 10,000 troops prepared. The South only receive a mere 3,000 casualties. A great victory. The spirit of the South rose in a flash. And I also obtained some great achievements. Did you hear? The new Lord of Pabram carved a path to Gudeos and cut off his head. Is that all? He also showed the best leadership when commanding his troops. Where did he come from? I've heard rumors about his talent. The heavens are helping the South. Mokdali is no longer a match for us. Stories about the war were spreading everywhere. I was always at the center of the stories. I had directly cut off Gudoes's head. There was a large-scale propaganda campaign. Oswin seemed determined to make me the hero of the South. Success can bring bad luck. I was authorized to lead 2,000 soldiers, and that number increased by a further 3,000. Oswin worried me. He seemed to instinctively be drawn to me. Maybe wrath and sloth were affecting him. Anyway, there was no harm in my authority going up. If I became a close associate of Oswin, he might sense the heart of the Hell Monarch or the Emperor's sword. He might try to stop me from climbing to the position of commander. The underground world was a place where I needed to be careful. Right now I was somewhat lacking, and I needed to catch up to Oswin. I would continue to become stronger as he made me into an hero, causing more southern troops to follow me. In order to do this, I needed solid performances. The South continued to achieve victories. Mokdali isn't a big deal. The South will take revenge, he will fall quickly. It was already the 5th one. Torium muttered from outside the fortress. The South had conducted 4 raids that succeeded. Mokdali lost his 4th subordinate Gudeos as well as the 5th, 6th and 7th subordinates. It is thanks to the spies giving us definite information. The previous 4 raids had taken place suddenly. Oswin moved quickly after verifying the information. Torium had a smile on his face. Well, those are just words. Lord Nim has become the hero of the South. Right now, the South is only talking about Lord Nim. Soon it will calm down. We'll see. The Southern commander is rising rapidly thanks to you. This has spread through the entire underground world. Then, will you stay in the South with the Southern commander? The value of Lord Nim will become higher. If things flowed smoothly, then it was likely to end up like that. However, that was only a possibility. I had no intention of being satisfied with my current position. When did the last commander die? I asked Torium, who replied, 150 years have passed. Indeed, I nodded. It had been stagnant for 150 years, with the wind of victory not blowing in this world. The wind started blowing out of hand once I arrived. Strange. Then I felt the surrounding atmosphere rapidly changing. The number of soldiers assigned to this battle was 40,000. The moving troops quickly fell silent. After crossing 2 mountains, something felt wrong as they stepped onto the wilderness. Originally this was a barren place. Torium said with confusion. I looked around and said, there are no soldiers in this location. The intelligence was wrong. The scouts will look around. There was no end in sight to the wilderness. It was necessary to have people scout around the entrance. Oswin raised a hand from the front. Just as people were about to scout around, Sir one hand appeared through the mud and grabbed a skeleton soldier. Sir hundreds, thousands of hands rose simultaneously. Cursed souls. Why are they in this place? Torium was shocked. However, the danger hadn't begun yet. Sound could be heard in the distance. Soon soldiers arrived from the other side. There were more soldiers than I could estimate. They swarmed towards the army here. Mokdali. This place. A trap. I took out Wrath. I sensed that it wouldn't be an easy fight. A dilemma. There was no place to escape. The difference in numbers, the geographic advantage, wasn't it too easy? The spies were caught, or they planned to give false information from the beginning. Everything had a cause. The previous victories might have been paving stones for this trap. But it was too late for regrets. It was wise to move before the situation became worse. Jeff blocked the rear with the soldiers. Jeff had been placed in the role of a non-commissioned officer. 5,000 troops couldn't operate alone. Lord Nim? That day, the day that Torium and others recognized me as a lord. Jeff's tone had changed. His tone became really awkward, but I left it alone. Anyway, I looked ahead. He is Mokdali. Kawang. Mokdali was a dragon. It was the first time I had seen a dragon, so I was amazed. He flew in the sky and his breath dissolved troops. Oswin was currently engaged in a fierce battle with him. But my role wasn't to help him out. The fleet-footed soldiers will follow me. We will eliminate the ones on horseback first. I chose the soldiers with great mobility. The quality of the troops was superior, but in a confusing situation like this, there was no control over the tactics. I started moving with 500 of the fastest soldiers. War wasn't a simple numbers game. There were bound to be dynamic changes depending on the situation of the battlefield. However, there were also irreversible decisions. I moved and succeeded in defeating 2 Death Knights and a Lich. A considerable number of skeletal horses and soldiers were removed, yet the situation was worsening. It is tough, I decided quickly. The battle had started less than 30 seconds ago, but the number of allies had dropped considerably. Without Oswin, there were too many enemies to defeat when running around alone. I quickly ran towards Oswin. Kua, you, Mokdali. Oswin cut off Mokdali's left wing. Oswin had lost 2 arms in the fierce battle. Did you think I wouldn't know about the spies? You shouldn't mess with me. Your fortress has already been decimated. Now return to the soil. Oswin, Quarurung. Another hit. The attack that could rival the magic power of a lich slammed into Oswin. His skin melted. Kururung. The breath was poured out once again. It was apparent that Oswin would melt without leaving a trace behind if he was hit. However, I was a little bit faster than the breath attack. I have to believe in Infinity Armor's defense. It was impossible to avoid taking any damage. I quickly grabbed Oswin, but my right chest was exposed to the breath. Hook. I had dealt with many enemies, so I was already at my limit. My eyes widened and my heart beat like crazy. The blood of a thunderbird couldn't hide the loud noise. Fortunately, the melted part of Infinity Armor quickly recovered. I bent to confirm it while running as hard as I could. Lord Nim, Torium, Jeff and 2,000 soldiers approached me. That number increased to 5,000. I said through gritted teeth, Jeff, Torium, I will take the southern commander and leave the battlefield. Take my horse. Torium agreed to my words. Jeff opened his mouth in support. Don't worry about the rear. The renowned warrior Jeff will block them. It was impossible not to know his intentions. You won't live. Jeff just laughed. I am dead anyway. Why is it a big deal if I die again? That's right, and I have no intention of becoming a skeleton soldier. I will get out of here and see you again. Lord Nim's name will inevitably shake the underground world. Go, there is no time. The enemy had noticed and started to pursue Oswin. Mokdali had lost 1 wing and he needed to take care of enemies, but his mobility was still good. Find me. It won't be hard once I become the master of this world. Torium chuckled at my words. You will become the master of the underground world. I understand. We will surely find you. By all means. I formed tight fists. I wanted to meet them again someday. I climbed on a horse. The collapsed Oswin was placed in front of me. Talk. As my horse ran, I remembered Mokdali's words to Oswin. The fortress has already been decimated. If that was true, then I couldn't head to the fortress. I have to modify the plan. Originally I had planned to help the South to test Maxium's reaction. But now the South was captured, so I had to choose the next best thing. First I will save Oswin. He had ruled for a long time, so he should have several hiding places in the South. And the 7 sins. I looked down at the gloves. I tried to take them off, but they didn't budge. It was clear that only the owner could remove them. Kururung. It had been less than 30 minutes since I left the battlefield. Noises were heard from behind me. Trackers. My keen eyes noticed the trackers. Fortunately, there didn't seem to be a lot of them. Tisk. I clicked my tongue and got off the horse. Oswin didn't move. Chapter 137 to 138, Phantom Cavalry. 8 times. That was the number of times I had to shake off the trackers before finding a place to rest. It was a naturally occurring cave. The previous owner seemed to be away. I checked all the sides and there was an easy path to escape. I set Oswin down against a wall. It had been 3 days, but Oswin still hadn't regained consciousness. I will rest for a bit. I was reaching my limits. My body was in a difficult state thanks to the trackers. A trap was placed at the entrance so that I would know if anyone came. Pebbles, vines and other materials that would make noises if moved were placed. It was just a basic trap, but it was better than nothing. It could be the subtle difference between life and death. I had managed to survive a few times in my previous life thanks to it. I closed my eyes. I immediately fell asleep. It was the 5th day. We were no longer being pursued. But I stayed alert. I scouted around and figured out a little bit of the geography. Once I finished patrolling and returned to the cave, Oswin was twisting his body. Was he feeling pain? By default, the undead were numb. It wasn't completely removed, but their senses were very dull. It was the same in regards to pain. Jellum. Oswin weakly opened his eyes. Then he stretched out a hand towards me. His body trembled like he was experiencing withdrawal symptoms. In order to maintain their bodies in this world, the undead needed Jellum. But there was none around. It was impossible to obtain any Jellum. Southern Commander Oswin, have you regained your spirit? Commander of the South, Kuik. His mind is coming and going. I watched with one hand on wrath. Oswin had a seizure before losing consciousness again. Since then, Oswin woke up several times only to faint again. However, he wasn't in a normal state. He was delirious most of the time. Sometimes he was a child, other times the Southern Commander. He also became the Twilight Blacksmith. The 7 sins shouldn't exist in this world. Get rid of them right now. Hell Monarch. Don't try to control me. In this way, Oswin unintentionally showed me a few possibilities. Schizophrenia, or maybe multiple personalities. There were a variety of personalities inside Oswin. The ego of the Southern Commander was the most intense, but multiple egos emerged. The medium that caused it. The gloves. Every time the personality changed, the magic power changed as well. It was clear that there was a close relationship. I couldn't hold a conversation with them. He repeatedly woke up and then fainted. All the evidence returned to my heart. There was no time to observe the developments. The most important thing was to leave the underground world and determine the situation regarding my dungeons. I was going to become the devil, the master of the underground world. I had the heart of the Hell Monarch, so I was already the master. His arms, 2 should be enough. 6 arms, 3 of them were already cut off. It wouldn't be a problem if one more was gone. I raised wrath. I wanted to see if any changes would happen after getting rid of a gloved arm. Chawahik. There was no hesitation. I cut off 1 arm. At the same time, Kuik, the stunned Oswin, started screaming. Oswin panicked and rose from his seat. He looked at his arm and breathed roughly for at least 5 minutes. The gloves are mine. The gloves were his top priority. The reaction was far from normal. Quarung, crazy. He started attacking randomly. It wasn't clear which ego was in control. It could be the Southern Commander or the Twilight Blacksmith. There was also a chance it was a new personality. What to do? I worried about it for a short moment. I had no choice. I either had to kill him or knock him out. My mind was inclined to the former. Oswin's gaze was fixed on the fallen arm that was still wearing the glove. It was reasonable to think that the gloves would fall off if the owner was killed. It can't be helped. I hoped to get some things from the Southern Commander. It didn't matter if his words were mixed. I had wanted to find information, but there would be no answers in this state. I held both wrath and the Emperor's sword. And at that moment, his crazy eyes vanished. That sword. He noticed it immediately. The personality in control knew the Emperor's sword. The enemy was gone. It is like the time with Maxium. There was no other way. The blood of the Thunderbird wiped away traces of the heart. I asked, "Who are you, Hell Monarch? Have you forgotten me? Didn't you contaminate Oswin's spirit by placing me directly inside him?" "I don't remember." That is okay. Great Hell Monarch, you finally returned. The true god." Flop. Oswin fell to his knees. Now the underground world will become stable. The Creator will lead us. Oswin's ego knew some of the work of the Hell Monarch. In addition, there seemed to be very juicy information. Where is the real spirit of Oswin? I tore apart his spirit like Hell Monarch Nim commanded. The true Oswin is nothing now. Although this body is a mess, I will recover quickly to faithfully serve Hell Monarch Nim. No, Oswin's spirit still remained. I had heard his cries. This ego doesn't know about it. In addition, his spirit seemed to be been split apart. After the body was weakened, they were able to slip through the crack to temporarily regain control. The ego had no idea this had happened. There was no strict adherence to one personality. Is there any way for Oswin's original spirit to be restored? Why, you must have a reason. Yes, there is a way. The curse on the gloves are suppressing the other egos. Oswin's ego will surface if that is gone. This person believed that I was the Hell Monarch. He revealed the truth to me, so there was no need to clear up the misunderstanding. The method to get rid of the curse? Are you thinking of removing the curse? The curse is so old that this is already as one with the body. He was saying that it wouldn't be easy. I touched my jaw. The curse is the primary cause, so I need to remove it. I figured out the main point. I stared straight into Oswin's eyes and said, "How long will you be in that guise? It isn't suitable. Reveal your original appearance." Please wait. I won't show such a disgraceful appearance. Oswin subsequently lay on the floor. Then smoke emerged from Oswin's head. The shape that the smoke took was a shade. It was approximately 3 times larger than a normal shade. Is that your real state? Yes, my monarch. Your name? I am Aduto. Aduto, good work. Quack. Even though the shade had a spirit body, it was possible to deal a blow with concentrated magic power. My magic power wasn't fully recovered, but I could successfully use the magic power of the moonlight. I struck with the Emperor's sword. Why? Aduto looked down at his chest and said in a shocked, little voice. I had dealt a critical hit, so he gradually faded away. Soon he would be completely destroyed. I put the sword away and said, I am not the Hell Monarch. I am Randolph Brigzeal. It might be his heart, but I was my own person. The demon called Randolph Brigzeal. I wouldn't be split apart like Oswin. My cold eyes turned towards Aduto. In the near future, Aduto would be completely destroyed. Duck. The gloves fell from the hands. It was evidence that the curse was gone. This is pride. I instinctively knew it after I put on the gloves. One of the 7 sins. Pride. I had gathered 4 of the sins. Wrath, sloth, greed and pride. I immediately felt stronger after putting on the gloves. This place? Where is this place? At this time, Oswin opened his eyes. Randolph? The battle? Why am I in a place like this? Mokdali? Yes. Where is Mokdali? The fact that he recognized me meant that the ego of the Southern Commander was in control. I need to suppress this ego. It was simple. If the Southern Commander was gravely injured, then another ego would emerge. Similarly, if that ego continued to be suppressed, then Oswin's real self would eventually wake up. Surung. Randolph? Southern hero. Why is your sword, Kuik? 99 times. It was the number of times Oswin was repeatedly knocked out and then forcefully awakened. The blacksmith ego had woken up several times but had fainted from confusion. Fortunately, it didn't go beyond 100 times. He finally started to show a little bit of stability. You? Who are you? I have already told you a few times. I am Randolph Brigzeal. I don't like repeating myself, so please remember this in the future. My memories are a tangled mess. The memories of several people are mixed together. But I am the blacksmith Oswin. The Southern Commander and everyone else were fake personalities. Oswin's true identity was the blacksmith. Were you originally a Doom Knight? Come to think of it, my body has changed as well. Oh my God, the Hell Monarch. That cruel person has played with me for thousands of years. He was angry because I threw the 7 sins into the crack. The crack. The dark spirits knew how to handle cracks in space. They could pick up free goods from the crack. Then they sold the items. Oswin turned his head. I remember that this is the world of the dead and Randolph is a hero in the South. But aren't you still alive? That's right, I am alive. Amazing. Those swords are somehow familiar. Wrath and the Emperor's sword. That cloak. Sloth. Apart from the Emperor's sword, they are all items that wandered through the crack. Where did you find them? It was a problem. Was it okay to let him know? The Twilight Blacksmith Oswin. I expected a lot from him. I wanted Oswin to follow me. If I hid the heart of the Hell Monarch from him and he learned about it later on, things could turn bad. It would be better to inform him now. I explained how I obtained the heart of the Hell Monarch and the Emperor's sword. Oswin's expression changed as he listened to the story. Something like that. Do you believe it? I can't not believe it. Then I guess the Hell Monarch has been destroyed. His heart belongs to Randolph. Maxium even mistook you as the Hell Monarch. Things are becoming interesting. Oswin laughed. He was still in a little bit of pain. Oswin was happy since the Hell Monarch was his enemy. Oswin, this isn't the time to have hazy memories. This was enough explanation. I had spent too much time finding Oswin. Now we needed to move. I was also the Southern Commander. The battle might have been lost, but don't worry. The real power of the South isn't at the fortress. Then, the Southern commander hid 2,000 Phantom Cavalry in a place that no one else knows. The Phantom Cavalry only responds to the Hell Monarch, but you should be able to wake them up if you have his heart. You will launch that strength and gather the remaining power of the South. Mokdali has lost one wing, so victory is possible. Phantom Cavalry. It was somehow familiar. The Phantom Cavalry are troops that belong to the Emperor. I read the description. I didn't know if 2,000 Phantom Cavalry could resolve this situation. However, Oswin had a confident expression. Follow me. We will go to wake up the Phantom Cavalry. The weary Oswin rose from his spot. It took 3 days and nights to arrive at the desired destination. A huge mountain made of bones. It was a place where skeleton soldiers were buried. The Southern commander created a secret place underground. The Phantom Cavalry are hidden there. Why? Oswin cocked his head with confusion. I was laughing. Is this your job? You don't understand. I hate the Hell Monarch. On the other hand, I wanted to be the Hell Monarch when I was the Southern commander. I've been protecting this place for a long time on behalf of the owner. There is a difference in your eyes. Yes, most commanders won't be like me. This state has lasted so long, they won't admit that the real Hell Monarch has appeared. Oswin's words weren't exaggerated. It was natural since he still had the memories of the Southern commander. Was Maxium unusual? Maxium. He had noticed from a distance that my heart belonged to the Hell Monarch. He shook off everything on the battlefield and ran over. On the other hand, the commanders would probably have different reactions. Emperor's Knight. I came to the conclusion that Maxium was unusual because he was the closest to the Emperor. Time is really unique. It can change everything. Even those with absolute loyalty will change over time. The false loyalty would be worn away. Even so, there is no change in this world. It is indeed a sad place. Oswin had an increased appreciation for time. He had finally found himself after so long. Everything changed, and this was a far cry from his original appearance, so, overall, there was a feeling of sadness. What do the commanders want? The Hell Monarch has stopped this world. As a blacksmith, I don't know why they are so obsessed with God. Maybe they want to escape the fate of guardians. Certainly, they guard the middle world from the demon world. The Emperor is not the Emperor. That is why he was called the Shadow Emperor. He became crazy in the later years and became known as the Hell Monarch. But his destiny. Oswin smiled sadly and continued talking. It is really funny. His cursed destiny became twisted with another person's. If the 7 sins had entered his hands, then the worlds would have ended. Weren't you the one who made the 7 sins? I created them. I used the God's metal that the Hell Monarch brought me. I was engrossed in the work. However, the finished goods were beyond my scope of understanding. I collected the 7 sins and abandoned them in a crack, where the dark spirits ended up picking them up. There was a bittersweet expression on his face. He had gone through all that work, and the result wasn't what he expected. What will happen if I collect all of the 7 sins? Gathering 3 had given him the skill, corruption. I couldn't help wondering what the effect of putting together all 7 sins would be. I don't know. That only thing I'm certain of is that the one who wears them can cause unprecedented destruction. Therefore, I will help you, but don't gather any more of the 7 sins. I'll think about it. The one who wore them would cause destruction. But the 7 sins weren't made accidentally. The Hell Monarch had intended to wear them. I don't intend to become the Hell Monarch. My goal was to go beyond that. The Hell Monarch was in a lower category. From the beginning, it was impossible to be the Hell Monarch. Come this way. The Phantom Cavalry are inside. There seemed to be no end in sight to the Tomb of Bones. Oswin stopped and cleared the bones off one part of the floor. After the dust was wiped away, stones with strange patterns on them were revealed. Jiuk. Oswin drew the pattern on his ribs. It was a bizarre sight. I jokingly spoke while watching Oswin. I guess it doesn't hurt for an undead. My ribs are reacting to the magic power in the seal. You examined it once. Make sure you remember everything. The glyphs on the ribs. They soon shone with light. The floor opened with a loud sound. Oh, this feels like a dream. This memory is real. Is now the time to be talking? I'm sorry. Let's go. Oswin stopped fussing over his memories and started guiding me. A spacious underground. A gigantic temple could be seen at the end. The inside of the temple. The skulls of 2,000 cavalry were lined up there. An ambient light was coming from the bones. They were self-illuminating. They even had expressions. The key is the Emperor's sword. Drip blood on the sword and order them. It wasn't a difficult procedure. I used the Emperor's sword to cut my index finger. Once blood flowed onto the sword, I slowly opened my mouth. Wake up, Kururung. The ground convulsed. Weak. The wind made a moaning sound. Light shone and the ghost cavalry started appearing. Chiok, Chiok. They lined up and bowed. I couldn't help but raise my head higher at the majestic sight. Brilliant. There were 2,000 phantom cavalry. All of them would follow me. After all of the phantom cavalry showed up, Oswin approached me. I don't remember seeing them move, but it really is a great army. They are the best power that the Hell Monarch hid. He was full of admiration. I looked ahead and said, the main fortress isn't the only stronghold in the south. Other forts exist. We will go there. A good plan. Mokdali should have eaten everything by now. I know the locations, so moving there won't be difficult. If we capture other forts, our survival will be announced and the remaining power of the south will gather. Where is the nearest fort? 2 days running in the northwest direction. Then let's go. We rode on horses. 2,000 phantom cavalry followed behind me. Mokdali's third subordinate, Charing. He was a lich who captured one of the southern forts and raised the morale of the soldiers. He drank from a branch of Jellum while climbing the walls. Mokdali Nim will become the supreme commander. A commander hadn't returned to the earth in hundreds of years. But this time, the southern commander was removed. The wind was starting to blow and it was apparent that Mokdali would become the supreme commander. Apart from the cruel commander Maxium, the other commanders are no match for Mokdali Nim. Charing also felt good about following him. He was currently third ranked and imagined getting a higher position. Opening the Emperor's treasure trove, he dreamed about receiving a significant portion of the treasure and becoming stronger. He noticed it while strolling the walls and receiving the greetings of the soldiers. Numerous lights could be seen in the distance. Is there something there? He raised his eyesight. He focused and could figure out the identities of the lights. Attack. Regroup. 2,000 soldiers on horseback were storming towards the fort. The charging power of the phantom cavalry was unimaginable. The particularly huge phantom cavalry aimed at the gates. Kwa Ru Rung. The gates at the entrance were split apart. The phantom cavalry entered. The massacre began. There was no need for words. I like it. It was simple and ignorant, but I didn't dislike this way of fighting. I gazed around and found the lich on the walls. I quickly realized that he was the captain of this place. Who are you? The lich asked. I took out Wrath, the hero of the south. Thousands of soldiers were wiped out by the phantom cavalry. I engaged in battle with the third subordinate Charing and won. I received help from Pride, but my pure strength was also above his level. Of course, there was some damage. 300 phantom cavalry returned to the earth. Nevertheless, this was a clear victory. After enjoying the afterglow of the victory, Oswin said, "Spread the rumor. The southern commander and the hero of the south have arrived to reverse the situation. There is no time. As soon as the forts are stabilized, we will run towards Mokdali. I'm not sure if we should recklessly run towards Mokdali. I will send troops to check his place of power. Proceed as quickly as possible." Oswin moved to the side. I was aiming for Mokdali, but this was a war. It was hard to see future aspects of a war. I didn't want to be stupid enough to move too late. Jeff, Torium. I stood on the walls and looked at the distant horizon. Spread rumors. I am alive, so come here. 1 month. In the meantime, I gathered up warriors. It was spread through the south and Oswin's followers came. There were numerous occasions when I moved against Mokdali's forces. They were brutally defeated every time. In addition, rumors about the phantom cavalry spread around the entire underground world. Therefore, I decided to reveal myself. I stopped hiding the heart of the Hell Monarch and the Emperor's sword. The return of the Hell Monarch. Such rumors spread so the morale of the enemy was at the worst point. You are not the Hell Monarch? Mokdali didn't acknowledge it even in the end. He had high self-esteem as a commander. In his heart, he was already the Hell Monarch. He didn't trust my sudden appearance. In contrast, Mokdali's eyes were full of fear. There was no choice. I had the Emperor's sword, the heart of the Hell Monarch and the phantom cavalry. Mokdali ran a long way just to be punished. No matter how frustrating, he couldn't deny it. That's right, I am not the Hell Monarch. I had no intention of denying it. I was Randolph Brigzeal, not the Hell Monarch. I raised wrath and the Emperor's sword. Mokdali returned to the earth with a scream and the Southern War finally came to an end. Chapter 139. The Final War. Oswin reclaimed the main fortress. Rumors about me were currently spreading through the underground world. I had the heart of the Hell Monarch and the Emperor's sword. The soldiers wondered if I was truly their monarch. I wasn't going to announce it officially. It would be left as rumors. Maxim, why isn't he coming out? Unlike Mokdali, the other commanders didn't move easily. Maybe they didn't believe it. However, one person should move after hearing the rumors. The cruel commander Maxim. He knew me. He gave me the Emperor's sword and pledged himself to me. Now I was out of the system, so I didn't know if Maxim still accepted me. Would he cheer and react like he did before? Or would he be hostile? Of course, I wasn't just waiting for his reaction. After stabilizing the fortress, I started to look into full-fledged actions. The wind was blowing. I planned to see this through to the end. I will go to the center. I needed to have the consent of every commander to enter the treasure trove. If they didn't follow me, then I would thoroughly crush them. Follow me. A small wind. There was a sharp gust as I moved. The troops moved en masse out of the south. I advanced towards the central area without hesitation. There were a total of 12 commanders. Mokdali had returned to the earth and Oswin was on my side. The future developments depended on whether they accepted me or not. But I would erect a guillotine in front of them before making a judgment. I would make them choose. Along with Mokdali's remaining troops that I absorbed, there was also the Phantom Cavalry. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that I had the best army. Eat the weak. This world was survival of the fittest. I made a decision to step on the weakest commander. They were shocked and unprepared. After having their power inflated, they claimed legitimacy and lied to the world. They are dogs that aren't worth leaving alive. It was like a commander raising their troops outside a warehouse. It was unfortunate that they presumed to become the emperor. It was similar to a dog wagging its tail at me due to extenuating circumstances. It was understandable. It wasn't easy to believe rumors that the Hell Monarch had suddenly appeared. Eliminating Mokdali didn't mean that I was the Hell Monarch. Anguish and atonement. As time passes, the collar around their necks will tighten. However, those were just my thoughts. I sharpened my swords. They were also covered with poison that would be deadly with one prick. Additionally, I was surprisingly stronger on the battlefield. Time was completely on my side. I was triumphant. The commanders in the central area fell to their knees without hesitation. 3 commanders had already returned to the earth. There were 8 commanders remaining. I needed to handle 7 of them. My army grew quickly. It was at a level where I could be a match for Maxim. But shortly after the 3rd commander fell, someone came to my fortress. He was Maxim. Your Majesty. Is it truly your Majesty? It has been a while. Flop. This place was my barrack. Maxim was the only one here. Maxim immediately went down on one knee. Forgive me for coming so late. I thought someone had impersonated your Majesty and didn't move. I thought it was someone's trap. Then I heard about your Majesty's achievements. Indeed, that was the reason why. I nodded. I don't care. After overwhelming the other commanders, Maxim is forced to believe your Majesty's return. I can't forgive those ungrateful fellows. Maxim clenched his fists. I gave a small smile and asked the question I was curious about. Maxim, I was told that you were neutral. Then what is the reason behind your sudden movements? Are you aiming for the treasures? Maxim shook his head. He made a fuss. How can that be? After seeing your Majesty, I started to move to clean up the trash. Their loyalty to your Majesty has been distorted and I felt greatly disappointed after seeing you come back. I was the reason why he started to move. Although he was guilty, I wasn't the Hell Monarch. There was no need to punish Maxim. Then Maxim, will you follow me to punish the other commanders? Of course, I have come to do so. New Maxim's 300,000 soldiers will follow your Majesty. Okay, I won't doubt you. Thank you. Maxim placed his forehead on the ground. You have come, so shouldn't you do all the work? I replied like it was no big deal, so he glanced up and said, I will take care of everything. Guide me out of the underground world. He had a slightly disappointed expression. It was natural. He had been waiting a long time in the underground world. I finally came, so he was distressed at the thought that I would leave. Maxim, there is nothing definite, and there is only a short time to wait. He was already convinced that I had amnesia. He was ready to follow me no matter what. Furthermore, if there was a way to leave from the treasure trove, then there would be a way to return to this world. Maybe it would be possible to link this place to my dungeon. There were some possibilities, but I couldn't easily say them. New Maxim, I will help your majesty until I return to the earth. Maxim got rid of all his doubts and heartache. Considering the constant fighting that would take place in the future, Maxim's attitude was correct. Thus, Maxim joined me. My power instantly doubled. There was no need to be afraid anymore. This was a golden opportunity to handle the commanders and open the treasure trove. I rapidly gained a hold over the central area of the underground world. Rumors that I formed an alliance with Maxim spread quickly. The commanders felt the danger and started to join together. It wasn't bad for me. I had gathered enough forces and was satisfied with how my strength had grown. The commanders have begun to assemble. We should handle them before they finish gathering, Maxim advised. But my thoughts were different. Leave it alone. We will take care of them all at once. It was an opportunity to sweep them all away. It would take too long to go around and wipe them out one by one. I had handled 3 commanders in 60 days. They were vigilant and ran away quickly. Even now, it wouldn't be strange if that happened. They will be prepared. They showed no signs of wanting to bow to me. They were waiting for me to show any weaknesses. It would be better to let them gather and wipe them all out at once. Maxim and Oswin, train the soldiers and prepare for the final war. We will finish everything at once. New Maxim, I will follow your majesty. New Oswin, I will follow your majesty. Both of them were part of my retinue. Maxim and Oswin seemed to be enjoying this situation. The misunderstanding that I was the Hell Monarch needed to be maintained until the end. I have to be ready. High Moon's swordsmanship. It was almost complete. With a little more practice, I would be able to make it mine. It took several long months. It will be complete. My mouth was tight as I entered the training room. My hands that were holding Wrath and the Emperor's sword trembled with excitement. 3 months. That was the time it took for all the enemies to gather. The remaining 6 commanders had formed a temporary alliance. Maxim and I thought that the gathering was ridiculous. It might be because they were threatened by the rumors about the Hell Monarch, but it made things easier. My army reached 500,000. I had 2 great commanders under me. It would be reckless to take command of the army without them. The enemy's army was approximately 600,000. They had slightly higher numbers. However, the 6 commanders had barely just joined together. It was obvious that their teamwork wouldn't match, unlike my army. I'm sorry. Those incompetent people have turned their hearts away from you. Maxim had an ashamed attitude until the end. This was in front of the treasure trove. It was the perfect place for the final war, but I once again felt sorry as I saw the hostile commanders. They were originally the ones that would lead the underground world, so they blamed me. It isn't your sin. They have been unable to throw off the confines of time and became corrupt. I raised the Emperor's sword and aimed it towards the enemy. Maxim, if you feel that they are wrong, then lay their heads down in front of me. I gave them plenty of time and opportunities to accept me. Cut off the heads of those who refuse. Then I will forgive you. I will follow your words. I'll present the heads of those unsightly commanders to your majesty. Maxim perked up. I looked forward. There were over 1 million soldiers gathered in front of the place where the treasure trove was stored. A wide plain. The 2 sides were facing each other. Only the winner could open the door to the treasure trove. The loser would quietly return to the earth. Charge! I shouted while quickly rushing forward. It was the beginning of the final war. The smell of death was everywhere. It was familiar. It was comforting like a home. Numerous enemies were blown away by Wrath and the Emperor's sword. Quack! Shawaruruk! I rotated my swords. A trance. The completed High Moon's swordsmanship was amazing. I immersed myself in the flow. As I repeatedly wielded the swords and killed the enemies, I felt something changing in me. The change was so natural I took it for granted. The magic power discharged from my heart fluctuated. Kuong. Then the sleeping lightning god woke up. Lightning god burned all the enemies in front of me. It was a reunion after a long time, but I acted casually like it had only been minutes. As time passed, I gradually got faster. The moonlight became more intense and it felt like my heart was bursting. It seemed like time was accelerating. At one point, things became static and I awakened. A surge of power. I felt like everything had returned. In fact, I knew that I was much stronger than in the past. It was like the limit had increased. I exceeded the limit. That's right, a sensation I had never experienced before. But I was certain, I had exceeded the limit. My potential had risen sharply. There was a smile on my face. I woke up from the accelerated time in a very good mood. The reason why? The Grand Dukes had hidden the secret to breaking through the limits. I am complete. The underground world had been a great help to me. If I hadn't grown, then in the end, I might have been defeated. But not in the future. They might grow to be equal to me. I needed to resolve this before it happened. I must end this war. It was coming to an end. Chapter 140. Return. The war continued for 3 days. I was in a hurry to return, so I pushed them day and night. I was more powerful than before and was already the strongest in this place. Lightning God burned down the enemies around me as I aimed only at the commanders. Oswin and Maxium recognized my intentions and attracted the attention of the troops. As a result, on the evening of the 4th day, I was able to return all 6 enemy commanders to the earth. They spoke right before my sword sliced their necks. I want to forget everything. This is just a dream. The stopped world, only time flowed. In the process, they became exhausted. Maybe they were waiting for someone to punish them. There was a look of peace on their faces before returning to the earth. They couldn't withstand the long years without the Hell Monarch. Once the commanders disappeared, the enemy's morale quickly deteriorated. The enemy ran away and those remaining were quickly cleaned up. Finally, my work in the underground world was finished. Shortly after the war ended, I stood before a huge mountain. This was the place where the Hell Monarch's treasures were hidden. There will be a way for me to return here. There had to be. My real goal was to become the devil. Ruling the underground world wasn't bad, but I didn't forget my goal. I needed to quickly leave here and determine the situation. After Okulos died, Earth was likely to have fallen into confusion. The key was how much time had passed. A little over 6 months was spent here, but the flow of time could be different depending on the world. Their souls were sucked in, I said while looking at the front. There was an enormous entrance in the mountain. The souls of the commanders who returned to the earth had been sucked in. Once a commander loses their body, their souls are meant to be sucked into the treasure trove. Your Majesty, Oswin and I will place my hands on the entrance. Once you place your sword in the middle, the warehouse will open. Maxium explained. I nodded. There was something like a keyhole in the bottom of the door. The sword was supposed to be placed there. Soon after, Oswin and Maxium touched the large door guarding the treasure trove. I picked up the Emperor's sword. I slid it inside the hole and the world started to shake. System recovery complete. The protection system is working. The details of the demon, Randolph Briggseel, have been updated. Impossible achievement. You are the first person to step foot on an unknown world. The system has obtained information about the underground world. A link has been created between the demon, Randolph Briggseel's dungeon, and the underground world. The link is being created. 1%, 2%, 5 million PT will be paid. 3,000 achievement points will be added. The treasures of the Hell Monarch has been opened. Unable to judge accomplishments. Searching for similar achievements. 4 million PT will be paid. 800 achievement points will be added. A list of treasures has been added to the achievements store. Incredible achievement. Surpassing the limits has been achieved for the first time. 1,500,000 PT will be paid. 1,000 achievement points will be added. A remarkable achievement. 50,000 creatures have been handled alone for the first time. 1 million PT will be paid. Achievements score 500 points will be added. An amazing accomplishment. The first to obtain 2 high-class undead as your subordinates. Title, Undead, XU, has been obtained. 1,200,000 PT. Great achievement. You will be forcibly transferred to Earth. A crack. I was sucked inside. When I opened my eyes, everything around me was different. Earth, the surrounding air and magic power. It was familiar despite being gone half a year. This was Earth. I had returned, but it wasn't near my dungeon. A person has suddenly appeared. Damn, what are you doing? Flee. Humans with extremely pale faces. The Caucasian people looked at me. I was on a street surrounded by tall buildings. Most of them were half destroyed and there were many humans killed. Monster wave. Creatures were moving in my direction. They drooled as they came closer. I was just about to pull out the sword when two people emerged from the crack in rapid succession. This place. Oh, Your Majesty. They were Oswin and Maxim. They had come together through the large crack. Oswin was confused because it was his first on Earth, but Maxim was familiar with it. Maxim had already experienced falling to Earth once. Clean up the creatures nearby. I gripped Wrath and the Emperor's sword. It would be better to talk to the humans, but they were distracted by the creatures. After I wiped out those around here, I would be able to get a better understanding of the current situation. 10 minutes passed. The awakened arrived, but the situation was already over. The three of us had killed 500 creatures. Everyone who watched was speechless with astonishment. They marveled quietly at the surrounding devastation. Demons? The representative of the 50 awakened that were maintaining a distance asked. It might be different if I was alone, but Oswin and Maxim looked like creatures. Yet, I was plainly asked if I was a demon. It seemed a little different from when I was last on Earth. Have the demons become more prominent? It certainly seemed like a long time had passed. I put my swords away and said, "A summoner." It was extremely rare, but there were some summoners among the awakened. It was perfect to throw off suspicion. The representative nodded at my words. "Ah, you are a summoner. Can I ask where you came from?" "South Korea, Heaven's Will. I am the leader of the raid group Devil Hunters." "Is that all you need? South Korea, Heaven's Will?" The response was ambiguous. Distrust was in their eyes. I spoke with a frown. "I would like to know the current date and the year." "July 13, 2021. 2021? Are you sure?" "It is certain." Tisk. I clicked my tongue. The flow of time was different. 1 year and 8 months had passed. If so, their attitude could be understood. The demons had started moving and revealed their presence. That's why I was asked if I was a demon. "By the way, are you really from South Korea?" "No one has come out of there for a while." The suspicions of the representative awakened weren't removed. His hands were placed on his sword. A sneaky action. In the meantime, the level of the awakened seemed to have risen. I'll open Mind's Eye. I almost forgot about it since the skill wasn't used in a while. I used Mind's Eye to grasp the level of the awakened. Name: Edgar Sheen. Occupation: Hero, Warrior. Title: * Survivor. R. Strength +4. * 1000 victories in battle. U. Stamina +7. Stats: Strength 65, +4, Intelligence 41. Agility 44, Stamina 48, +7. Magic Power 48, Potential 246 +11 311. Uniqueness: none. Skill: Deadly Blow. U. Mental Focus. R. Most of the awakened gathered here had similar figures. It was surprising. I couldn't believe the changes in 1 year and 8 months. Their abilities had grown while I wasn't around. If I thought of them as the average, the elite would probably exceed a total of 300 stats. It meant that things had changed dramatically over time. What does it mean that no one has come out? Have you been living in the mountains? I have been in a similar place for the last 2 years. Ah, then you might not know. The representative of the awakened removed his hand from the sword. His doubts were almost erased. He subsequently said, "South Korea is under attack from various demons. They closed in from all over the place. The aim of the demons seemed to be the Korean dungeon and the awakened." The attack of several demons? Shouldn't I be glad that it wasn't occupied yet? I breathed out. I needed to consider the possibilities before moving hastily. I needed to hear the before and after of the situation. Since when? Since a year ago. It is impossible to contact them because all electricity is disconnected and the sky is occupied. Well, South Korea isn't the only country in such a situation. Angels and demons are fighting. They aren't thinking of humans. Ahiyu. All of the awakened sighed. The angels. There is no time to waste. It was worse than I thought. I needed to move before I lost everything. Well, thank you for the help. Summoners are very rare. My name is Edgar, the guild master of the American Guild, Golden Time, Hyok. I turned around and ran as hard as I could. I disappeared in a flash, causing the awakened to make a fuss. Did he use a space scroll? Edgar was the guild master of the Golden Time Guild. He blinked and withdrew the hand he had held out. The basic things had been restored, but my connection to Yi still wasn't working. In the end, I had to go directly to the dungeon to check out the situation. Is this place called Earth? It is amazing. Oswin had heard the circumstances about how I obtained the heart of the Hell Monarch. He knew that the demons were fighting to become the devil. His Majesty has work to achieve here. Keep silent. Maxim spoke in a serious manner. The two of them moved together with me. Of course I will follow. Oswin laughed lightly. Oswin seemed to be enjoying this situation. Maxim thought I was the Hell Monarch and was delighted to follow me. However, I had no time to worry about their conversation. I need to reach South Korea soon. Streets filled with creatures could be seen. It was already at an intermediate level, but I sped up even more.